Chapter 251, Snape's Missing Cauldron. Where are you going? Snape, engrossed in setting up his cauldron, noticed Blake edging towards the door and couldn't help but call out to him. I'm heading back to do my homework. As you know, I'm a very diligent student, Blake replied with earnest sincerity. Having achieved his objective of visiting Snape, he was eager to return. The chill of the late autumn night made the prospect of staying in Snape's cold, underground office unappealing, especially when compared to the cozy warmth of the Hufflepuff common room. But this is the first complete brewing of the potion you've researched yourself. Don't you want to witness it firsthand? Snape pressed, unable to hide his curiosity. For a potion master, the inaugural brewing of a new concoction was a momentous occasion, one he himself would never dream of missing. Blake, however, dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. There's no need. I've already double-checked the data, so I'm confident the potion will turn out perfectly without my supervision. Besides, I can't contribute much by staying. I'll have plenty of opportunities to observe the brewing of this homemade potion in the future. Snape's expression soured. Did Blake truly not care at all? Is there anything else, Professor? Blake asked, noticing Snape's hesitation. Do you intend to make your potion recipe public? Snape inquired. Potion researchers had the option to share their discoveries with the world or keep them secret. To verify a potion's efficacy, one only needed to test the finished product. Many of the potion recipes known to the wizarding community had been voluntarily disclosed by their creators. Blake's grin widened, and Snape immediately recognized the mischievous glint in his eyes. It was clear that Blake had no intention of sharing his groundbreaking work, a decision Snape found unsurprising yet frustrating. After all, the potion in question was no ordinary brew. It was a life-extending elixir that promised to be in high demand. Understood, Snape replied curtly. As Blake turned to leave, Snape's voice stopped him. Aren't you going to clean up your mess before you go? He gestured disdainfully at the clutter of cups and plates strewn across the table. Blake coughed awkwardly. Well, Professor, there are house elves for that. You made the mess. You clean it up, Snape insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. A slight smirk then played on his lips. Unless you want to risk losing house points for sneaking into a professor's office? Caught in the act, Blake had no choice but to tidy up the mess he had made. Satisfied with Blake's compliance, Snape returned to his potion brewing. When he looked up again, Blake was gone, and the previously cluttered desk was now spotlessly clean, its surface gleaming. Snape nodded in approval, thinking a firm hand was necessary with Blake. However, a moment later, confusion clouded his features. Something was amiss. He scanned the now empty table, and realization dawned on him. Where's my new cauldron? Where's the cauldron that's my size? Snape fumed, realizing he had been outwitted. As September gave way to October, the air grew colder. One chilly night, Blake was nestled in the room of requirement, a stolen cauldron sitting atop a table in front of him. Inside, a spicy hot pot broth bubbled away, a stark contrast to the cold outside and the warmth of the stolen victory inside. Blake savored a piece of meat from the pot, taking a delicious bite before sighing contentedly. In this chilly weather, nothing was more comforting than enjoying a hot pot. Across from him, Cassandra was struggling with her utensils, a slotted spoon in her left hand and a fork in her right. Unlike Blake, she hadn't mastered the art of using chopsticks and had to make do as best as she could to enjoy the meal. On the other side, Hermione was fanning her mouth, her tongue burned by the spice. She had quickly learned how to use chopsticks, outpacing Cassandra in both speed and quantity, which led to her current predicament. Reaching for a glass of water, she was intercepted by Blake, who offered her a glass of milk instead. This will help with the spiciness and make it easier to bear, he explained. Hermione gratefully took a long sip, finding immediate relief. I remember seeing this on TV, she remarked. It's a technique from the East, called hot pot. I never imagined it would be so delightful. Blake corrected her pronunciation with a smile. It's called hot pot, not hot pot. Cassandra, having finally managed to secure a generous portion of meat slices, inquired curiously, Where did you get this pot? Did you make it yourself? It's quite ingenious. Blake shook his head. No, I actually got this pot from Professor Snape. At this revelation, Hermione and Cassandra's enthusiasm visibly waned. The thought of eating from a pot that might have once contained potion ingredients like toad eyes or mouse intestines was unsettling, to say the least. Sensing their discomfort, Blake quickly clarified, "Actually, this is a brand new pot. Professor Snape bought it by mistake. It was meant for hot pot, but he never used it. I took it before he could." Think about it. If he had bought the correct pot, why would he let me keep it for so long? Knowing his character, he would have taken it back immediately. Relieved by this explanation, the hot pot suddenly seemed appetizing again to Hermione and Cassandra. As they continued to enjoy the meal, Blake suddenly lost his appetite. "You guys go ahead. I need to step out for a bit." With that, he stood up, leaving the two girls in surprise as he vanished through a dimensional door, presumably headed to the Forbidden Forest. "What's he up to now?" Cassandra wondered aloud. Hermione, who had caught a glimpse of the scenery beyond the door, replied, "It looked like the Forbidden Forest, but it's all right. Blake treats it as if it's his second home." Indeed, Blake had made a name for himself in Otherworld by taming its most fearsome monsters. The dark creatures of the Forbidden Forest were unlikely to pose any threat to him. Meanwhile, back at the table, a turtle was attempting to eat a chili pepper, much to the girls' confusion. "Blake mentioned it enjoys chili peppers," Hermione explained. "He believes it helps the turtle feel warm without needing to bask in the sun, eliminating the need for hibernation." "That sounds a bit far-fetched," Cassandra remarked, skeptical. In the Forbidden Forest, Blake took a deep breath, the cool air and familiar scent of vegetation invigorating him. As a druid, he felt a profound connection to the forest. Suddenly, he was alerted by a series of rustling sounds, followed by an ominous fishy odor. Casually, Blake prepared to face whatever challenge lay ahead, his senses heightened and ready for action. Blake cast a bubble charm on himself, just as the ground around him began to tremble. Moments later, a large, colorful spider emerged in front of him. Xiaokai, the spider, lay submissively at Blake's feet, noticeably larger than it had been just half a month prior. Blake affectionately patted its massive paw before surveying the surroundings. The woods around them teemed with acromantulas of varying sizes. The largest was as big as a carriage, while the smallest resembled a hunting dog. They densely encircled the area. "Good job, Xiaokai," Blake commended, noting the spider's apparent success. His presence in the Forbidden Forest was no accident. He had been summoned by Xiaokai while enjoying a hot pot meal. Another enormous acromantula appeared behind Xiaokai, one that Blake recognized as the spider he had casually released into the forest earlier. Despite no longer using druidic magic to enhance it after acquiring Xiaokai, the previous enhancements had significantly transformed the ordinary acromantula. Without Xiaokai, this spider could have become the new king of the acromantulas. "Master, help, trouble." Xiaokai communicated in broken, halting speech. Unlike Aragog, who had learned to speak human language from Hagrid, Xiaokai had only been studying with Blake for a little over 10 days during the holidays and could barely articulate a few words. "It seems you're in trouble," Blake observed. Even without activating his heightened senses, he could feel another swarm of acromantulas rushing towards their location from afar. The group Xiaokai had assembled was sizable and possessed formidable individual strength. However, the approaching acromantulas outnumbered them by at least 3 to 4 times. Despite Xiaokai's talent and the impressive feat of rallying a small army of acromantulas in such a short time, the challenge of winning over loyalists among Aragog's descendants was daunting. Yet, Xiaokai's efforts had made it the de facto king of the acromantulas in the Forbidden Forest, now facing a rebellion from other descendants unwilling to accept its rule. "No wonder you sought my help," Blake said, understanding the gravity of the situation. "With so many opponents, it's indeed a tough battle for you, but I will assist you." Xiaokai's excitement was palpable. Its large claws tapped rapidly on the ground, producing a rhythmic ta-da-da sound. Although it was not yet as powerful as Aragog, surviving this attack and diminishing the enemy's forces could elevate it to Aragog's level. No longer concealing his power, Blake's school uniform robe transformed back into a cloak. He then levitated, crossing his arms as he floated above the ground. A moment later, he conjured a massive seraphim shield, enveloping all the allied acromantulas beneath it, ready to protect them from the impending onslaught. Chapter 252, The Acromantula Rebellion. Help, need, us? Xiaokai's speech was fragmented, but Blake understood its intent. It was inquiring if Blake required their assistance once more. No need, Xiaokai. Have your siblings stay hidden and avoid going out. I'll handle this by bolstering our forces, Blake responded calmly. As the Acromantula army approached, the Seraphim shield emitted a series of resonant clangs upon impact. Despite the shield's expanded coverage, its defensive capability had slightly diminished. However, this was not a concern for Blake, as the attacking Acromantulas posed no real threat to the shield's integrity. Blake's gaze intensified, a golden hue illuminating his eyes as he activated the Eyes of Truth. Among the swarm, one Acromantula, radiating a distinct purple aura, caught his attention. Despite the overwhelming number of Acromantulas, Blake was unfazed. He recognized the potential within this particular Acromantula and decided to act. With a swift motion, Blake conjured numerous clones of himself, each a physical manifestation created through the supreme magic of the Archon form. These clones, each wielding a dark red chain known as Cytorak's Crimson Chain, targeted the Acromantulas identified by Blake. The chains, imbued with druid magic, ensnared the selected Acromantulas, pulling them into the Seraphim's shield. This magic, powered by the essence of Emperor Weishan, allowed Blake and his clones to tame and turn these creatures against their former allies. The process was efficient, quickly depleting the enemy's forces before the battle had even begun. "All right, Xiaokai, it's our turn," Blake signaled, and his clones vanished. Xiaokai, understanding the cue, rallied the newly acquired Acromantula forces. Their numbers now vastly outnumbered the opposition, shifting the battle's momentum in their favor. As Blake deactivated the Seraphim shield, a cry rang out, "Acromantulas will never be slaves. Down with Aragog's tyranny." Xiaokai led the charge, followed by a horde of formidable Acromantulas, eager to overthrow their oppressors. Blake observed the unfolding chaos, noting the Acromantula's intelligence and societal structure. With the tide turned, the battle quickly became a rout. Recognizing his presence was no longer necessary, Blake opened a dimensional portal and vanished from the scene. "Recently, there's been quite an uproar in the Forbidden Forest," Hagrid reported, catching his breath. Dumbledore, intrigued, set aside his quill. "What sort of commotion?" "It's the Acromantulas, Professor," Hagrid explained. "A descendant of Aragog?" Dumbledore inquired, well aware of Aragog's lineage and significance. "Yes, Professor, it's quite peculiar," Hagrid said, stroking his beard in bewilderment. "I spoke with Aragog directly." Dumbledore listened intently, knowing the significance of any disturbance involving the Acromantulas. Hagrid, having no reason to withhold information from Dumbledore, prepared to share the details of the unprecedented rebellion within the Forbidden Forest. Recently, a young and formidable Acromantula appeared in the Forbidden Forest. "This spider is unlike any ordinary Acromantula," it was reported. "Its body is vibrant with colors, suggesting it might be a mutated species." However, it was also noted that this spider is not a descendant of Aragog, the elder Acromantula residing in the forest. This creature appeared out of nowhere, quickly asserting dominance over the other Acromantulas and amassing considerable strength, Dumbledore mused, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "So, this mutated Acromantula is challenging Aragog's authority and leading its own faction?" "Yes, exactly. They've clashed several times, with the most recent battle being the largest," came the reply. "I attempted to broker peace between them, but both the colorful Acromantula and Aragog refused. They seemed determined to fight to the death." Dumbledore nodded, his expression grave. "This situation is indeed peculiar. How did this mutated Acromantula come to be in Bowl? Hi now?" He then turned his attention to Hagrid, who appeared uneasy. "You're concerned about Aragog's well-being, aren't you?" Hagrid nodded vigorously. "I know it might be much to ask, but—" Dumbledore cut him off, understanding his request. "You wish for me to aid Aragog. However, Hagrid, this is a matter for their species to resolve. Our interference could provoke the mutated Acromantula, potentially endangering the students. Their safety must be our priority, even if it means not aiding Aragog directly." Hagrid's worry was palpable. But Aragog is old and nearly blind. How can he stand a chance against this new threat? The thought of being unable to assist a dear friend in need weighed heavily on him. Dumbledore, sensing Hagrid's distress, offered a suggestion. Perhaps you could speak with Blake. There seems to be a connection between him and this situation. Hagrid's spirits lifted at the mention of Blake, known for his expertise with magical creatures. Yes, Blake might have the solution. With his knowledge, he could potentially end the conflict, ensuring Aragog's safety. Later, after Blake finished teaching an herbal medicine class, Hagrid approached him with the situation, hoping for a resolution. Blake was taken aback, as he had orchestrated the conflict within the Acromantula community, with the mutated spider being one of his own creations. "Why do you seek to aid Aragog?" Blake inquired. "Because he's my friend, just as your magical creatures are to you," Hagrid responded, drawing a parallel between his relationship with Aragog and Blake's with his animals. Blake corrected him. "Hagrid, there's a misunderstanding. While I do care for my creatures, I maintain absolute control over them. The situation with Aragog is different. They don't do anything I don't want them to do," Blake asserted confidently. "But can Aragog be commanded to move? Can you actually control Aragog?" Hagrid asked, visibly stunned by the notion. Of course, he knew deep down he couldn't command Aragog. At best, Aragog was merely grateful for Hagrid's initial kindness, which in turn prevented his descendants from considering Hagrid as prey. Aragog wouldn't fully obey Hagrid's commands. This was evident when, after answering Harry and Ron's questions, Aragog didn't prevent the other spiders from attacking them. If not for the timely arrival of the Ford Anglia, Harry and Ron would have been devoured. Thus, Blake harbored no sympathy for Aragog and had deliberately orchestrated such a conflict. On one hand, it was a strategy to gain control over a formidable Acromantula army. On the other, it was to incite internal strife among the Acromantulas. Given their rapid reproduction and growth rates, it was only a matter of time before the Forbidden Forest and potentially beyond would be overrun by them. Without Aragog, the Acromantulas would lose their last shred of restraint. By instigating this war through Xiaokai, Blake aimed to cull the weaker members of the Acromantula population, thereby controlling their numbers and enhancing the combat effectiveness of his own Acromantula forces. This power would be entirely under Blake's command. "Is there really nothing we can do?" Hagrid lamented, his voice heavy with sorrow. Blake stroked his chin thoughtfully. "It's not entirely impossible." Chapter 253. Cassandra's Insight. Hagrid was initially consumed by the fear that his best friend's end was near. However, when Blake mentioned there was still hope, Hagrid's emotions overwhelmed him. The half-giant, towering over 3 meters tall, couldn't hold back his tears. Blake, understanding the depth of Hagrid's feelings, empathized with his situation. Being a half-giant, Hagrid had faced his share of prejudice and isolation. His unique appearance often subjected him to unwarranted suspicion and loneliness, a sentiment Blake could relate to. The only exception to this treatment was Dumbledore, who stood by him when he was unjustly accused by Tom Riddle. To Hagrid, his monstrous friends, like Aragog, were the only ones who didn't see him as an outcast. Reflecting on Hagrid's bond with Aragog, Blake realized the significance of their friendship. For over 50 years, Aragog had been more than just a pet. He was a confidant and a friend. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Blake asked Hagrid about his ultimate wish for Aragog. Hagrid's initial hope for peace was quickly dismissed by Blake, who explained the harsh realities of survival in the forest. Hagrid then expressed his simple desire to save Aragog from a violent end. Blake proposed a solution that involved removing Aragog from his position of power and allowing him to retire peacefully. However, Hagrid was troubled by this suggestion, explaining that Aragog was not just any spider, but the patriarch of all Acromantulas in the Forbidden Forest. This revelation made Blake reconsider the situation. He was aware of Hagrid's well-intentioned but ultimately harmful actions in introducing Acromantulas to the forest, which had disrupted the natural balance. Despite Hagrid's concerns, Blake emphasized the importance of adhering to the laws of the forest. He explained that Aragog's age and the emergence of a stronger Acromantula threatened his position. The only viable option was to intervene before Aragog was overthrown. Moved by Blake's reasoning, Hagrid, with tears streaming down his face, agreed to the plan. The decision was difficult, but it was made with Aragog's best interest at heart. Together, they would find a way to ensure Aragog's safety, honoring the deep bond between the half-giant and his extraordinary friend. Back to the matter at hand, Hagrid expressed his intention to speak with Professor Dumbledore about Aragog. Aragog is too old now, his 8 eyes are blind, and he can't even stand up. He poses no threat to anyone anymore. I believe Professor Dumbledore will see reason in my request. Hagrid mused, though Blake was unsure if Dumbledore would acquiesce. The method Hagrid planned to use to bring Aragog back was unknown to Blake, but it mattered little to him. His focus was on the Acromantula in the Forbidden Forest, which he was determined to have under his control. The soul is the most magical part of the human body. It's almost impossible for a living person to detect their own soul, yet it seems to permeate every part of us, Blake pondered, his thoughts deep in the complexities of soul magic. He was so engrossed in his book that he didn't notice someone calling out to him. It was only when he sensed a familiar presence that he looked up, just in time to see Ginny Weasley walking past him with a dazed expression, seemingly oblivious to his presence. This was unusual, considering their past interactions and the assistance he had provided her father. Normally, Ginny would have greeted him, but now she walked by as if he were invisible. Blake's eyes narrowed, recognizing the same ominous aura that emanated from Ravenclaw's crown. It seemed Ginny had placed her complete trust in Tom Riddle, allowing her soul to be manipulated. Concerned, Blake was about to approach her when he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his calf. Turning around, he found Cassandra on the ground, clutching her calf in pain and accusing him of being a bad guy for having such hard legs. Blake, somewhat bemused, closed his book. "You're being slightly unreasonable. It's not common to kick someone and then complain about their legs being too hard," he remarked. Cassandra's tear-filled green eyes stared back at him, a mix of pain and frustration evident in her gaze. She explained that she had called out to him, but he hadn't responded because he was too absorbed in his book. However, her irritation grew when she saw Blake immediately look up as Ginny passed by, interpreting his concern as something less innocent. In a fit of anger, Cassandra had kicked Blake, only to find that it was like kicking an iron pillar, causing her to burst into tears. Blake, realizing the misunderstanding, helped Cassandra to a nearby chair and gently examined her calf, revealing a black and purple bruise. "Fortunately, there's nothing wrong," he began, his voice soft as he prepared to address both the misunderstanding and Cassandra's injury, hoping to clear the air and provide some comfort. Cassandra glanced nervously at the corridor, where people could appear at any moment. The thought of someone seeing her in this state made her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She attempted to pull up her socks, but Blake gently stopped her. "Hey, stay still. If you keep moving, I might not heal it properly, and it could scar," he warned, a hint of bluff in his voice. The threat of a scar made Cassandra freeze, allowing Blake to proceed. He drew Nono's wand and pointed it at Cassandra's calf. Without uttering a single spell, the bruises that marred her skin vanished, leaving her skin pristine once again. "There, all done," Blake announced, then added, "Next time you decide to kick someone, remember not to use your calves. They're quite fragile. Instead, use the front part of your foot. That way, even if you end up kicking something as hard as an iron plate, it won't hurt as much." Cassandra barely listened to Blake's lecture on the proper technique for kicking. In a rush, she pulled up her socks, straightened her school uniform and robe, and looked up at him. Her cheeks were flushed, and her emerald green eyes shimmered as if filled with tears. Suddenly, she stretched out her leg and kicked him again. The next moment, she was cradling her foot, shrinking back. You lied. It still hurts to kick like that." "Hey, I was teaching you how to kick others, not me. Didn't you realize I'm quite sturdy?" Blake retorted, half amused, half concerned. This time, tears genuinely started to fall from Cassandra's eyes, and she began to cry. "Hey, don't cry. Does it really hurt that much?" he asked, moving closer to inspect her foot. Cassandra recoiled, stammering, What are you doing now?" "What do you think? I'm going to check your injury. You knew I was tough, yet you kicked me with all your might," Blake said, trying to keep the mood light. "Go away. Don't touch my socks. Please, not here." Cassandra pleaded through her tears, her voice a mix of pain and embarrassment. Blake realized the situation might look peculiar to any passerby and decided it was best to respect her wishes. All right, let's find a more private place to make sure you're okay. No more kicking, agreed? He offered, extending his hand to help her up, ensuring they maintained a semblance of decorum in the bustling school corridors. Chapter 254, Tom Riddle, the Rooster Assassin. In the room of requirement, Blake gently set down Cassandra's feet. She was seated, her face hidden behind her hands, her ears flushed with embarrassment. A faint mist seemed to rise from her head, as if she were a character straight out of a fairy tale dubbed the Steam Princess. Hey, next time, try not to kick me, Blake said, recalling how Cassandra had struggled earlier. He had resorted to using a dimensional door to transport her directly to the room of requirement for healing. Cassandra remained silent, her face still covered. Seeing her silence as a challenge, Blake picked up the socks that lay on the floor and approached her again. Cassandra's body tensed as he held her feet, preparing to put her socks on. It's cold, and you could easily catch a cold with bare feet, Blake remarked, his tone neutral. Cassandra felt a surge of defiance, wanting to kick him away, but found herself powerless in the moment. Her feet were in Blake's grasp as he slipped her socks on, her resistance fading. Leaving the room of requirement, Cassandra's legs felt weak. You bad guy, she exclaimed before hurrying away, her head bowed. Blake scratched his head as he exited the room, pondering the irony of his situation. Really, no matter how much you help others, you still get called a bad guy, he mused, pulling out a map from his robe. It was a replica of the Marauders map, which he had managed to duplicate and even improve upon with his skills in alchemy and magic. After completing the copy, he had returned the original to the Weasley twins. Opening the map, Blake scanned the moving dots representing the students and staff of Hogwarts. He noticed the dot labeled Cassandra, quickly moving away from him. Hey, silly girl, can you stop running so fast? I'm not a lion or a tiger. What if you fall? He muttered, then whispered, Ginny Weasley. The map responded to his voice, zooming in on Ginny's location, a feature Blake had added. He found her near Hagrid's cabin, seemingly searching for something. Hagrid's roosters are in danger, Blake realized, understanding Ginny's likely objective. The rooster's crow is known to be fatal to a basilisk, making them a target for anyone wishing to unleash the creature within Hogwarts. Tom Riddle, through his influence over Ginny, would need to eliminate these roosters to ensure the basilisk could roam freely. Opening a dimensional door, Blake stepped out near Hagrid's hut and spotted Ginny staring intently at a rooster in its cage. The malevolent aura around her was less concealed than before, indicating Tom's presence had returned to the diary. Ginny! Blake called out, startling her. She turned, clutching her chest, and saw Blake with a mischievous grin. Blake! You scared me! Ginny's voice was weaker than usual, a detail that didn't escape Blake's notice. Having recently delved into soul magic, Blake had discovered that Ginny's soul power had diminished, leaving her visibly drained and subdued. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, Ginny. What are you doing here? Blake inquired, his tone softening as he addressed her, concerned about her well-being and the sinister plot unfolding around them. Ginny seemed flustered as she spoke. Oh, it's nothing. I heard Ronald talking about Hagrid, so I wanted to come and visit. Her gaze shifted away. He seems to be away, so I'm planning to go back. Blake observed Ginny closely, immediately sensing her dishonesty. With his adept use of legilimency, Ginny's thoughts were an open book to him. Really? He probed gently. Yes, I'm going back. Goodbye, Blake, Ginny hurriedly replied, turning to leave. Blake watched her retreat, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Through his brief delve into her mind, he had discovered that Ginny herself was unaware of why she'd been outside Hagrid's cabin. It was as if she had been in a trance, only to snap out of it upon Blake's arrival. Confused and startled by the experience, Ginny had chosen not to confide in anyone, opting instead to seek answers from the enchanted diary she had been confiding in. Blake chose not to stop her, realizing that the diary, though not physically with her, had begun to exert a form of control over Ginny from afar. Tom, you're advancing quickly, but the faster you grow, the more intrigued I become, Blake mused, his gaze shifting to the rooster cage and then back in the direction Ginny had left. It was clear to him that Tom Riddle, through the diary, was using Ginny to gather information, likely planning another move soon. Understanding the implications, Blake knew he had to act. The only way to ensure the basilisk could be unleashed was to eliminate all the roosters, preventing their crowing from being a threat. Just then, Hagrid arrived, dragging a wild boar back from the forbidden forest. "Oh, Blake, are you here to see me?" he asked, setting the boar down and scanning the surroundings warily. Blake glanced at the boar. "This is for Aragog," Hagrid explained, a hint of pride in his voice, despite mentioning the creature's declining health. "Thanks for caring, Blake," Hagrid added, grateful. Blake dismissed the thanks with a wave of his hand. "I didn't do much, Hagrid. No need for thanks." "But you saved my friend's life. Of course, I should thank you," Hagrid insisted, his voice filled with emotion. Blake smiled, seizing the opportunity. "Well, if you insist on thanking me," he gestured towards the chicken cage. "Could you spare some large roosters?" Later that night, in the room of requirement, Blake contemplated the rewards he had received, including a diamond treasure chest from Snape and 2 gold chests from Cassandra. He knew he had to be strategic about opening them, planning to save more before using a luck potion to maximize the benefits. Checking his watch, he noted it was nearly 11. "Xiao Hei, are you sure something interesting is happening on the 2nd floor of the castle tonight?" he asked the small turtle on his desk, who confirmed with a lazy nod. With that, Blake activated the invisibility effect of his cloak and left the room of requirement, making his way to the 2nd floor. As he patrolled the corridor, his senses heightened. He stumbled upon an abandoned girl's bathroom. "Could it be?" he murmured, slipping inside invisibly. The bathroom was deserted, except for the sound of a faint voice coming from one of the cubicles, lamenting being the subject of mockery. Blake's gaze lingered on the faucets of the washstand, curiosity piqued. He approached with a gentle step, meticulously examining each faucet until his eyes caught the subtle engraving of a small snake on one of them. A smile crept onto his face, a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. He found himself in the ladies' restroom, the very place haunted by the ghost known as Moaning Myrtle, which also concealed the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, Blake pondered the possibilities that lay ahead. "Could tonight be the night I venture into the chamber and confront the basilisk?" he mused. The basilisk, a creature of considerable power, intrigued him. It was a challenge he felt drawn to, a potential addition to his collection of conquered beasts. Recalling the method to access the chamber, Blake knew that speaking open in Parseltongue to the faucet would reveal the hidden entrance. However, a problem presented itself, causing him to scratch his head in frustration. "But I don't know how to speak Parseltongue," he lamented. An idea then struck him. If I were to transform into a snake, could I naturally speak it? Lost in thought, Blake was abruptly pulled back to reality by the sudden appearance of Moaning Myrtle. She emerged from one of the stalls, floating midair with a forlorn look directed towards the bathroom door. "Are you here to mock Myrtle too?" she cried out. A figure silently entered the restroom, paying no heed to Myrtle's accusatory questions. "Ha! Ignoring Myrtle, are you?" she scoffed, only to resign herself to the familiar sting of neglect. "Ah, I'm accustomed to it. Your disregard for Myrtle," she wailed before dramatically plunging back into the toilet from whence she came. In the shadows, Blake, concealed by his invisibility, cautiously peered towards the entrance. The dim light faintly illuminated the face of the newcomer, revealing a familiar figure. "Ginny?" he whispered, a mix of surprise and concern in his voice. The unexpected presence of Ginny Weasley in such a peculiar setting at night deepened the mystery. Blake's mind raced with questions about her intentions and the potential dangers that lay ahead. The night in Hogwarts was proving to be more eventful than he had anticipated, with the secrets of the chamber beckoning and the unforeseen involvement of a fellow student. Chapter 255, The Weasley Twins. "Even our sister, scumbag, we fight with you." Ginny, possibly under the control of Tom Riddle, stood at the entrance of the bathroom, a black-covered diary clutched in her hands. She cast an indifferent glance at the stall where Myrtle had hidden before slowly making her way inside. Blake, concealed nearby, observed silently. Neither Ginny nor the diary she held could detect his presence. He pondered over Myrtle's constant presence in this particular bathroom, yet the absence of any signs of the Chamber of Secrets being opened. It dawned on him that Myrtle's sensitive nature provided Tom with ample opportunities to provoke her. Ginny approached the sink where Blake had been hiding moments earlier. Her gaze was vacant as she lethargically raised the diary, opening it towards the sink. An ethereal figure emerged from the pages, a boy with black hair, undeniably handsome, but marred by an arrogance uncharacteristic for his age. Blake couldn't help but inwardly scoff at the figure's demeanor. "I'm impressive, yet I don't boast. What gives you the right to be so proud?" At this moment, Tom's apparition was faint, almost as if he could vanish at any second. He leaned over, inspecting the small snake engraved on the faucet, and began to hiss in a peculiar manner. Blake, understanding Parseltongue, deciphered the command as "open the door." Instantly, the sink began to transform. Each basin contracted and shifted aside, revealing a hidden pipe, the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. Tom's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Hogwarts had changed since his time 50 years ago. Back then, Dumbledore's watchful eyes had thwarted any chance of reopening the chamber. But now, with Dumbledore's attention diverted, the opportunity was ripe for Tom to act. His initial plan to unleash the basilisk and purge the school of Muggleborns had evolved into a personal vendetta against Harry Potter. He was determined to understand how Harry, as an infant, had defeated Voldemort, and to ensure that mistake was not repeated. Ginny, unaware of these specifics, only knew of Harry's victory over Voldemort, but not the reasons behind it. Tom, however, was resolved to uncover the truth. Tom's shadowy form dissipated into a black mist and retreated back into the diary. Ginny, still under his influence, leaped into the pipe without a second thought. Blake, puzzled by Tom's intentions to release the basilisk prematurely, decided not to dwell on it. He remembered that in the original story, all the roosters were killed before the basilisk's release, which occurred around Halloween. Yet, it was only the beginning of October. Without further contemplation, Blake approached the gaping entrance and descended. His cloak billowed behind him, controlling his fall. Below, Ginny slid down the pipe like a child on a playground slide, with Blake swiftly catching up. At the bottom, a dark force cushioned Ginny's landing, allowing her to alight gently. Her eyes, still devoid of life, guided her effortlessly through the labyrinthine underground passages. Blake followed closely and soon found himself before a circular door adorned with intricately carved venomous snakes, their tails entwined and heads radiating outward. Tom reemerged, hissing commands in Parseltongue. The snake heads began to retract, and with a crisp click, the door cracked open. This time, Tom chose not to return to the diary, signaling the beginning of a new chapter in his sinister plan. Ginny continued her unwavering march forward, while I grappled with the door, exerting all my strength to pull it open. This was my first venture into the Chamber of Secrets, and my eyes immediately scanned the interior, alert to any lurking dangers. The chamber stretched out before me, a long, dimly lit expanse. Stone pillars, intricately carved with entwined serpents, rose majestically, supporting a ceiling that seemed to dissolve into the shadows above. These pillars cast long, eerie shadows across the room, which was enveloped in a green, mysterious mist. My gaze, enhanced B, the ability to see through darkness, was drawn to the far end of the chamber. There, against the dark wall, stood a statue as tall as the room itself, depicting an ancient figure with a monkey-like face and a long, sparse beard that nearly touched the hem of its stone-crafted wizard's robe. 2 gray feet were planted firmly on the chamber's smooth floor. It was a statue of Salazar Slytherin himself. Ginny, her expression blank, walked deeper into the chamber. Tom, resembling a ghost, floated behind her, following her into the secret depths. I trailed closely behind them. At the foot of the Slytherin statue, Tom instructed Ginny to stop. With a gentle wave of his hand, Ginny lay down on the ground, her eyes tightly shut as if she had fallen into a deep sleep. Tom's gaze lingered on the statue, a complex emotion flickering in his eyes. He then spoke in Parseltongue, the language of serpents. Hidden not far away, I watched intently, a golden light flickering in my eyes. The eye of truth, which I possessed, rendered me immune to all forms of eye magic, including the deadly gaze of the basilisk, a creature whose mere look could kill. As Tom's hissing filled the air, the statue of Slytherin suddenly came to life, its mouth opening wide. From within, a massive green snake emerged, landing on the ground with a thunderous crash before swiftly slithering towards us. The basilisk fixed its gaze on the ghostly figure of Tom and Ginny, who lay motionless on the ground. Understanding the basilisk's hisses, I realized it was expressing its hunger and desire to hunt. Tom, using Parseltongue, commanded the basilisk not to harm Ginny, stating he still had plans for her. The basilisk, however, protested, driven by its hunger. Tom attempted to pacify it by promising to rid the area of roosters, which are deadly to basilisks, and to eventually let it hunt. Reluctantly, the basilisk retreated back into the statue. Tom then turned his attention to Ginny, who lay on the ground. Transforming into a shadow, he returned to his diary. Moments later, Ginny stirred, opening her eyes and slowly standing up. She bent down to retrieve the diary from the ground. Just then, 2 spells shot out from my hiding spot. One struck Ginny in the back, causing her to pause momentarily before collapsing. The other hit the diary, instantly suppressing the turbulent soul aura within it. Under the influence of my necromantic magic, Tom's remnant soul, powerless to resist, was forced into a deep slumber once again. I materialized from the shadows, first examining the diary before turning my full attention to Ginny. Gently, I cradled her in my arms and lightly tapped her forehead with my wand. In an instant, Ginny's eyes snapped open, flooded with a deluge of returning memories. Suddenly, a flood of memories that had been erased surged into Ginny's mind. She remembered everything, how she was gradually controlled by the diary, her aimless wandering around the school, and finally, the opening of the mysterious Chamber of Secrets. The memories that Tom Riddle had wiped clean were now vividly replayed in her mind. As she regained her senses, a wave of terror washed over her. The thought of her body being manipulated while her consciousness was sidelined was utterly horrifying. Lifting her gaze, Ginny saw Blake standing before her, his expression serene. For reasons she couldn't fathom, the sight of him brought a sense of calm to her panicked heart. "I thought you might have a lot to say," Blake spoke gently. Ginny glanced at the diary lying on the ground, and her body involuntarily shuddered with fear. It dawned on her that the diary she had once trusted was the very thing that had controlled her. Blake noticed her trembling and, with a flick of his wrist, conjured a cup of hot cocoa. The origin of the cocoa was a mystery, but its warmth was undeniable. "Take a sip. The hot cocoa will make you feel better," Blake encouraged. He explained that Ginny had been absorbing some of Tom's diary's soul power, and even a bit of her life force had been drained. Fortunately, Blake had intervened early, so the loss was minimal. "With proper replenishment, you'll recover soon," he assured her. "I think it's best to discuss tonight's events with Professor Dumbledore," Blake suggested softly. But, Ginny stammered, panic evident in her voice at the mention of Professor Dumbledore. Reading her thoughts, Blake smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, you won't be expelled for this." With a wave of his wand, the diary flew into his pocket. It was imperative that it not fall into the wrong hands again. Ginny looked at the diary, struggling to find the words. "There's no rush. We have plenty of time tonight," Blake said, helping her to her feet. As they retraced their steps, Blake explained his presence. "I happened to be on a night walk and noticed your odd behavior, so I followed you. Please forgive my intrusion and don't be offended." "No, of course I'm not offended. I'm just grateful you found me in time," Ginny replied, her voice thick with emotion. Her legs still felt weak, partly from physical exhaustion and partly from fear. She didn't know the true identity of the boy in the diary, but it was clear he was no ordinary character. If Blake hadn't intervened, who knows what terrible deeds she might have been compelled to do. Upon reaching the entrance of the chamber, Ginny looked up at the steep, slippery pipe with a frown. She remembered sliding down it like a slide, but now the thought of climbing back up seemed impossible. "Blake, what should we do? We can't climb up." "Don't worry, just leave it to me," Blake said with a reassuring smile. Instead of summoning a phoenix or using apparition, he gently picked up Ginny. You don't," she protested weakly, but her strength was not enough to resist. "Don't overthink it. I'm just taking you up," Blake assured her. In the next moment, Ginny understood why Blake had told her to hold on tight. With a swift motion, they ascended rapidly, the wind whistling past them. Blake, with his levitation cloak, was flying. Ginny looked at Blake in astonishment. He can actually fly, she thought in awe. At that moment, a system prompt sounded for the first time in a long while, announcing a silver treasure chest reward for Blake. Soon, they emerged from the secret chamber, Blake holding Ginny securely in his arms as they slowly made their way back. Plummeting to the ground from midair, Ginny found herself at the entrance of the secret chamber, which began to morph once more. With a series of clicks, the gaping entrance sealed itself, leaving no trace of the passage but the ordinary sink in its place. Ginny, wide-eyed and bewildered, realized she had unwittingly become entangled in a mysterious plot. Yet, in this moment of confusion, she couldn't help but notice the warmth of Blake's embrace, a comforting presence in the chaos. "Can you walk?" Blake's voice pierced the silence, pulling Ginny from her daze. Stammering, Ginny replied, I. "Hey, it's all right. I'll carry you to the headmaster's office," Blake offered, his voice tinged with regret. "I know you're tired, but it's okay. I was foolish to get involved in this mess. I'll explain everything to the headmaster," Ginny hurried to say, her voice laced with determination. "Good. I'm relieved you understand. It's important for the safety of everyone at Hogwarts," Blake responded, his tone serious as he continued to support Ginny, making their way out of the bathroom. Ginny, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, chose not to protest further. Meanwhile, Fred and George Weasley found themselves dodging Argus Filch, the caretaker, taking refuge in an empty classroom with the Marauder's map spread before them. "Ha! The old fool's gone up to the 7th floor," Fred exclaimed with a laugh, eyeing the magical document. But George's laughter soon faded, replaced by a look of shock. His finger trembled as it pointed to 2 dots labeled Ginny and Blake, moving closely together on the map. "Why are Ginny and Blake's dots so close to each other?" George's voice was a mix of confusion and concern. "Blake, that scoundrel, he's with our sister!" Fred's joviality turned to outrage. "Where's my bat?" Fred growled, his protective instincts kicking in. "I'm ready to duel him for this," George declared, both brothers united in their sudden mission to confront Blake, misunderstanding the situation entirely. Chapter 256, A Request to Study the Diary. For Blake, carrying Ginny was as effortless as if she weighed nothing at all. He ascended several flights of stairs with ease, not once showing signs of strain or breathlessness. Ginny, nestled in Blake's arms, found herself stealing glances at his profile, a peculiar sensation stirring within her. It was in this moment she understood the allure older students had. Blake was undeniably handsome. Lost in her thoughts, Ginny's reverie was abruptly shattered by the sudden appearance of 2 figures at the stair corner. It was Fred and George, who had tracked them down using the Marauder's map. The sight of Blake holding Ginny, who seemed to be leaning into him with a gentle trust, left the twins frozen, their expressions a mix of shock and outrage. "Blake, you," Fred stammered, struggling to find the words. "You playboy," George accused, his voice laced with disbelief. "My sister is so beautiful, how could you not be tempted?" Fred continued, his tone accusatory. "What a scumbag," George added, shaking his head in dismay. "She's so young, how could you do this?" Fred exclaimed, his disappointment palpable. Blake, faced with the twins' theatrics, could only respond with a weary patience, a hint of annoyance flickering across his features. Meanwhile, Ginny, upon spotting her brothers, let out a startled scream, but instead of pulling away, she buried her face deeper into Blake's chest, seeking comfort. Fred and George's lamentations grew louder at this, their emotions running high. Blake, however, remained unflustered, addressing them with a calm authority. "Have you howled enough?" he asked, his patience wearing thin. "Ginny has just been in danger. If you're done, I suggest you inform Professor McGonagall and head to the headmaster's office." The mention of danger silenced the twins instantly, their concern for Ginny overtaking their initial outrage. "What? Ginny, what happened?" Fred asked, his voice filled with worry. "Are you hurt?" George added, his earlier anger forgotten in his concern for his sister. Blake, seizing the moment of calm, urged them to find Professor McGonagall, and also suggested informing their family about the incident. The gravity of the situation was not lost on the twins, and they hurried off to follow Blake's advice. Once the twins had departed, Blake and Ginny continued their journey to the headmaster's office. Ginny, relieved at her brother's departure, looked up at Blake with a mix of gratitude and awe. His ability to discern her worries and offer reassurance was both comforting and mystifying to her. "We're almost there," Blake informed her as they reached the 8th floor. Gently, he set Ginny down, allowing her to stand on her own, though she still felt a bit unsteady. Approaching the gargoyle that guarded the entrance to the headmaster's office, Blake uttered, "Pearl milk tea." Despite the incorrect password, the gargoyle, having been instructed by Dumbledore to admit Blake, moved aside to reveal the spiral staircase. Ascending the staircase and entering the office, Ginny found herself captivated by the intricate silver instruments and the portraits of past headmasters that lined the walls. It was her first time in Dumbledore's office, and the wonder of it all momentarily distracted her from the reason for their visit. The group rubbed their eyes, still heavy with sleep, and turned their curious gazes toward the scene unfolding before them. Dumbledore, adorned in a purple nightcap, was seated comfortably in a chair, engrossed in a book, seemingly enjoying a quiet moment before retiring for the night. As he looked up, his gaze, magnified by his half-moon glasses, settled on Blake and Ginny, lingering a bit longer on Ginny, who appeared somewhat embarrassed under his scrutiny. "It seems you've had quite an extraordinary experience tonight," Dumbledore remarked, closing his book and rising from his chair. Ginny, standing before Dumbledore, seemed to shrink slightly under his penetrating gaze, her eyes darting away. "Yes, we encountered something quite extraordinary," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ginny has been through a lot tonight," Dumbledore observed, pulling a chair closer for her to sit. He then turned his attention to Blake, noting Ginny's frail appearance. "Miss Weasley seems quite drained. Perhaps, Blake, you could share the story first?" Without hesitation, Blake reached into Dumbledore's drawer, retrieving a box of lemon drops and offering them to Ginny. "Eat some sugar. It helps people forget their bad experiences," he said, a hint of mischief in his tone. Dumbledore watched the scene unfold with a mix of amusement and resignation, his treasures plundered yet again. Despite his mild annoyance, he couldn't help but appreciate Blake's boldness. Blake began his tale with an air of excitement. "I was out collecting images for a painting when I stumbled upon Ginny," he explained, choosing his words carefully to avoid admitting outright to breaking school rules. Dumbledore, stroking his beard thoughtfully, listened intently without interruption, a first for him hearing such a candid admission of nocturnal adventures. Blake recounted the events of the night, carefully sticking to the facts without venturing into speculation. "A shadow of a boy emerging from a diary, summoning a giant snake?" Dumbledore mused, his eyes twinkling behind his glasses. "And where is this diary now?" Dumbledore inquired. "Right here," Blake replied, producing the diary from his pocket. "I've been studying soul magic recently, so I managed to seal the entity inside." "Do you need me to unseal it?" Dumbledore asked, taking the diary. "Not for now," Blake answered, understanding the potential danger the diary posed if left unchecked. Dumbledore examined the diary closely, his expression turning grave when he discovered the name T.M., riddle inscribed on the first page. The significance of the name was not lost on him. He knew exactly to whom the diary belonged. At that moment, the door to the office swung open, and a group of people entered, led by Professor McGonagall, who looked concernedly at Ginny and Blake. "Merlin, it's a relief you're both safe," she exclaimed. "Ginny, how are you?" Mrs. Weasley's voice followed, filled with worry. Blake noticed that the newcomers were all members of the Weasley family, with Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, Percy, Fred, George, and a sleepy-eyed Ronald making their way into the room. Only Charlie and Bill were absent, away on work. Upon seeing her mother, Ginny burst into tears and rushed into her embrace. Professor McGonagall explained to Dumbledore that she had temporarily opened a fireplace passage in her office connected to the Weasleys' fireplace, a decision Dumbledore commended. "Albus, how can we be sure this is reliable?" Mr. Weasley asked anxiously, concerned for his daughter. "It appears Miss Weasley will need to share her side of the story," Dumbledore said, holding the sealed diary tightly in his hand, ensuring its contents remained contained for the time being. Soul magic is indeed fascinating. After Ginny had spent some time crying, she began to share her story, albeit in broken fragments. She had discovered an empty diary among her old books. Intrigued, she decided to write in it, only to find that the diary responded to her. At this point in her recounting, Mr. Weasley was beside himself with worry. "Ginny, haven't I always taught you?" he exclaimed. "What have I always said? Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain," Ginny recited sheepishly. "Why didn't you bring the diary to the professors?" Mr. Weasley continued, his voice rising in frustration. "A suspicious item like that is undoubtedly imbued with dark magic." Ginny sobbed. I didn't realize. I found it in a book my mother gave me. I thought maybe someone had left it there by mistake." As she went on, Ginny explained how she gradually came to trust the diary until she was completely under its influence. From that point, she often found herself in places without any recollection of how she got there. It wasn't until Blake encountered her wandering one night and followed her that the truth came to light. After Ginny finished her story, it was clear that Blake had helped her break free from the dark artifact's control. Mr. Weasley, overcome with gratitude, shook Blake's hand vigorously, too moved to speak. Mrs. Weasley embraced Blake, thanking him profusely for saving their daughter. "God, if you hadn't been there," she murmured. Blake, feeling somewhat embarrassed by the attention, managed a shy, "You're welcome," before retreating behind Dumbledore. Sometimes, overwhelming gratitude could be a bit intimidating. "Miss Weasley should be taken to the hospital wing immediately. This has been a traumatic experience for her," Dumbledore announced. "The school will not punish her. After all, many wizards, far older and wiser than she, have been deceived by Voldemort." The room fell into a stunned silence at the mention of that name. "Wait, Albus, whom did you say?" Professor McGonagall asked, suspecting she had misheard. The Weasleys, too, were taken aback, having caught the name of the Dark Wizard. "Yes, Voldemort," Dumbledore confirmed, causing a shiver to run through the Weasley family. That name held a terrifying power over them. Dumbledore held up the diary. "This belonged to Tom Riddle. It's quite remarkable," he mused. "He was, without a doubt, one of the most brilliant students Hogwarts has ever seen." "Few know that Voldemort was once called Tom Riddle," Dumbledore continued, his voice soft yet carrying a weight of history. "I taught him myself, 50 years ago. After he left school, he traveled widely. By the time he returned, he had transformed into Voldemort. Dark magic and dangerous experiments had altered him beyond recognition. Few could connect the Dark Lord Voldemort to the intelligent, handsome head boy who once walked these halls," Dumbledore added, lifting the diary slightly. Clearly, the spirit that manifested from this diary was Voldemort at the age of 16. The revelation left the room in a heavy silence, with Ginny particularly shocked. Blake felt a mix of emotions. The dramatic turn of events had caused quite the stir, though not of his own making, leaving him without the usual satisfaction of having orchestrated the drama. However, the gratitude of the Weasley family, expressed through several treasure chests, meant he didn't leave unrewarded. As the Weasleys prepared to depart, Blake pulled Mr. Weasley aside. "Sir, it's no coincidence that you know whose belongings ended up among Ginny's books," he cautioned. Mr. Weasley's eyes widened with realization. It seemed he had an idea of who might have placed the diary with his daughter. "Thank you, Blake," he said, before rushing off. After Professor McGonagall and the Weasleys had left, Dumbledore turned to Blake. "Thank goodness you were vigilant and averted this crisis. Otherwise, Arthur might have faced a difficult ordeal." "Professor, what do you plan to do next?" Blake asked, sensing there was more to be discussed. "What should we do with this diary?" Dumbledore asked, his voice carrying the weight of the decision. "It must be destroyed, of course," Dumbledore replied, his tone leaving no room for debate. "There's no question that it will be destroyed, but may I study it for a few days before it's destroyed?" Dumbledore regarded Blake with a discerning gaze, the gravity of the request not lost on him. He asked with a seriousness that matched the situation, "Do you understand what this is?" "I suspect it could be a Horcrux," Blake ventured, his intuition guiding his guess. Dumbledore's expression remained unreadable for a moment, pondering the implications of Blake's request and his understanding of the object in question. The diary, a seemingly innocuous item, held dark secrets that could unravel the very fabric of their world if mishandled. Dumbledore knew the dangers of Horcruxes all too well, the lengths to which their creator would go to protect them, and the peril he possessed to anyone who sought to destroy them. Your intuition serves you well, Dumbledore finally said, acknowledging Blake's astute guess. Indeed, this diary is no ordinary book. It's imbued with a fragment of a soul, part of a dark ritual to achieve immortality. The implications of studying such an object are vast and fraught with danger. Blake nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation, but also the invaluable opportunity to learn from such a dark artifact. His curiosity was not driven by a desire for power, but by a need to understand the enemy they faced, to uncover weaknesses that could be exploited in the battle against darkness. Dumbledore, recognizing the earnestness in Blake's request and his potential to contribute to their cause, made a decision. "Very well," he said. "I will entrust the diary to you for a limited time. However, you must exercise extreme caution. The knowledge contained within can be as perilous as it is enlightening." With a sense of solemn responsibility, Blake accepted the diary. He knew the days ahead would be filled with challenges as he delved into the mysteries of the Horcrux, but he was determined to use this knowledge for the greater good. The path was fraught with danger, yet it was a necessary step in the quest to defeat the darkness that threatened their world. Chapter 257, The Dilemma of Dumbledore's Decision. Dumbledore's beard quivered, not from the cold, but from sheer anger. The audacity of the young wizard before him was astonishing. Blake, fully aware that the object in question was one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, had the nerve to request it for further study. To Dumbledore, this was akin to a child naively asking to play with a bomb. The very idea was preposterous. "Since you're aware that this is a Horcrux," Dumbledore began, his voice heavy with disapproval, "then you must also understand the magnitude of its malevolence. It's imbued with dark magic so potent that it has deceived countless wizards far more experienced than you." Dumbledore continued, his tone growing more stern. "How can you assure me that you won't be ensnared by the residual soul within, just like Ginny was? The thought of lending it to you for study is out of the question." Blake knew convincing Dumbledore would be no easy task. "Professor, even if you refuse to entrust the diary to me, destroying it immediately isn't wise either." "And why is that?" Dumbledore challenged, his skepticism evident. "The purpose of destroying a Horcrux is to ultimately defeat Voldemort." "But are we certain he only created this one Horcrux?" Blake countered, a sly smile playing on his lips. This was the question he had hoped Dumbledore would ask. Dumbledore paused, the implications of Blake's question dawning on him. "You're suggesting that understanding the full extent of Voldemort's Horcruxes, including their locations, could be key to defeating him?" "Exactly," Blake affirmed. "And since Horcruxes contain fragments of Voldemort's soul, they potentially hold invaluable information about his plans and the extent of his crimes." Dumbledore pondered this, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. "I see your point, but these Horcruxes are, in essence, Voldemort. It's highly unlikely they would betray their creator by revealing such critical information." Dumbledore's skepticism was not unfounded. Voldemort, cunning as he was, would never leave such a glaring vulnerability unaddressed. The Horcruxes would sooner destroy themselves than aid their master's enemies. Blake, however, was not deterred. "I understand your concerns, Professor, but I have some knowledge of soul magic that might prove useful here." Dumbledore shook his head, unconvinced. "Your assurances are not enough, Blake." In response, Blake presented Dumbledore with a piece of parchment. "Perhaps this will change your mind." Dumbledore examined the parchment, initially dismissing it as a mere drawing. However, upon closer inspection, his eyes widened in astonishment. The parchment depicted Peeves, the poltergeist who had been absent from Hogwarts for some time. "You've managed to seal Peeves within this parchment?" Dumbledore asked, incredulous. Indeed, Blake had achieved something remarkable. Peeves had been a constant presence at Hogwarts, eluding countless attempts to banish him. The fact that Blake had succeeded where others had failed was a testament to his skill and ingenuity. Dumbledore's surprise was a clear indication of Blake's capabilities. Perhaps there was more to this young wizard than he had initially thought. The dilemma before Dumbledore was clear: to destroy the Horcrux and eliminate a piece of Voldemort's soul, or to explore the possibility that it could provide invaluable insights into defeating the Dark Lord once and for all. The decision was not an easy one, but Blake's demonstration had certainly given him much to consider. The plan involved a bell jar enchanted with various containment spells, positioned to trap Peeves, the mischievous poltergeist, when he floated into the right spot. However, the plan disastrously backfired. Peeves not only shattered the bell jar with ease, but also armed himself with an arsenal that included scimitars, crossbows, a large-caliber muzzleloader, and even a small cannon. His random shooting spree, ostensibly for his amusement, posed a serious threat to the students' safety, prompting a 3-day evacuation of Hogwarts Castle. The incident culminated in Professor Euprocia Moore, the headmistress at the time, negotiating a series of agreements with Peeves for the surrender of his weapons. This event marked the most catastrophic and final attempt to expel Peeves from Hogwarts. It also led to the early retirement of the administrator, Mr. Calpe, who cited health reasons. Peeves had proven himself a formidable challenge, one that previous headmasters, with the exception of Bloody Balor, had failed to manage. Yet, Blake had seemingly resolved this long-standing issue effortlessly by sealing Peeves away, a feat that left even Dumbledore astounded. Upon witnessing Dumbledore's astonishment, Blake nonchalantly explained, "The last time I encountered him, he was executing a rather extreme prank on a friend of mine. So I decided to retaliate with a prank of my own. I sealed him inside a piece of parchment for a month before releasing him." Dumbledore, though skeptical, had to concede, "Okay, I'll take your word for it." He recognized that Blake's successful containment of Peeves indicated a significant proficiency in soul magic. However, Dumbledore harbored doubts about Blake's ability to handle the more sinister remnants of souls trapped within Horcruxes, particularly those of Voldemort. Horcruxes were inherently dangerous and evil, and Dumbledore questioned, "Even if you can compel the residual soul in the Horcrux to communicate, how will you resist his manipulations? Voldemort is exceedingly adept at seduction." Blake confidently responded, "I'm well aware of his persuasive tactics, but remember, I've resisted Grindelwald's allure. In comparison, Voldemort's attempts at seduction seem rather simplistic." He elaborated on the distinction between Voldemort's and Grindelwald's approaches to manipulation. Voldemort appealed to individual desires for power and supremacy, promising wealth and prosperity to his followers. In contrast, Grindelwald advocated for the rights of wizards as a collective, envisioning a transition from darkness to enlightenment for the entire wizarding community. This ideological difference, Blake argued, made Grindelwald's influence more profound. Dumbledore, visibly agitated at the mention of Grindelwald, expressed his concern. "Indeed, had I not intervened, you might have found yourself on the way to Nurmengard." Blake firmly reassured him, "I have no intention of going to Nurmengard. My friends, my loyalty lie with Hogwarts." Dumbledore, reflecting on his question's flaw, likened it to a hypothetical dilemma posed to a boyfriend about choosing between saving his girlfriend or his mother. Acknowledging the complexity of the issue, Dumbledore conceded, "Perhaps I've oversimplified the matter. Despite your talents, we must not underestimate Voldemort's capacity for corruption." Dumbledore feared that Voldemort's Horcruxes could awaken dark tendencies within Blake, not merely through persuasion, but through a more insidious, magical influence, akin to the corrupting power of the Supreme Lord of the Rings. Blake, undeterred, smiled and proposed, "So, if I demonstrate my immunity to the corrupting influence of Horcruxes, would you then permit me to examine the diary for a few days?" His request hinted at a deeper strategy, one that involved confronting the dark allure of Voldemort's Horcruxes head-on. Dumbledore's beard began to quiver once more. "And how do you propose to prove that?" he inquired. "It's quite straightforward," Blake replied, a smile playing on his lips as he produced an item from his pocket. It was Ravenclaw's diadem, another of Voldemort's Horcruxes, which Blake had nearly rendered powerless through his experiments with soul magic. The fragment of soul within the diadem had been so weakened that it was mostly dormant. As such, the diadem had lost its value to Blake, who now saw an opportunity to present it to Dumbledore, potentially unlocking new rewards in exchange for a Horcrux that was still intact. "Behold, this is another of Voldemort's Horcruxes, Ravenclaw's diadem," Blake announced triumphantly. A palpable sense of shock emanated from Dumbledore, his astonishment so profound it was as if it could be heard aloud. Look, I've been experimenting with this diadem for quite some time. Surely, if it had any power to bewitch me, it would have done so by now, Blake reasoned, his smile widening. Dumbledore quickly regained his composure and snatched the diadem from Blake's grasp. He examined it meticulously, his nose nearly brushing against the artifact due to the thoroughness of his inspection. After a moment, Dumbledore placed the diadem on the table and proceeded to conduct a thorough examination of Blake, ensuring he hadn't fallen under any dark enchantments. Once satisfied that Blake was free from any curses, Dumbledore allowed himself a moment of relief before turning his attention back to the diadem, his expression one of sheer astonishment. "This is indeed a Horcrux," Dumbledore exclaimed. "Where did you find it, and how long ago?" "I discovered it in the Room of Requirement," Blake replied. "It was not long after I first arrived at the school last year." Dumbledore's beard trembled once more. "So, you found a Horcrux early on, but only now decided to present it to me?" Blake sensed the tension in the air. "Well, I didn't know what it was at first. It wasn't until the end of last semester that we began to suspect Voldemort might have created a Horcrux. And yet, after realizing its true nature, you chose to withhold this information until now, intending to trade it for another Horcrux to experiment with." Dumbledore's tone was incredulous. Feeling the situation turning against him, Blake made a move to escape. However, Dumbledore, with his vast experience, anticipated this and swiftly caught Blake, placing him over his knee. "What in the world?" Blake thought in panic. "He can't possibly intend to spank me. At my age, that would be utterly humiliating." Just as Dumbledore raised his hand and Blake braced himself to flee, the oak door of the headmaster's office creaked open. Ginny and Professor McGonagall entered, their timing impeccable. The sight that greeted them left both momentarily stunned, and an awkward silence filled the room. "It seems we've arrived at an inopportune moment," Ginny murmured, her gaze lowered. Blake's face flushed with embarrassment. At that moment, he contemplated fleeing to the farthest reaches of the earth. P.S. The author apologizes for any inconvenience, as the next chapter may be delayed due to unforeseen circumstances. Chapter 258, The Mystery of the Chamber of Secrets Unraveled. In a moment that left everyone in shock, Blake vanished from Dumbledore's grasp. In the blink of an eye, he found refuge behind Professor McGonagall, his voice barely above a whisper. "Professor McGonagall, I believe corporal punishment is unjust." Though the details were unclear to her, Professor McGonagall had witnessed Dumbledore's uncharacteristic attempt to discipline Blake physically. She addressed Dumbledore with a stern tone. "Albus, we have long since abandoned corporal punishment as a method of education. It's a regressive approach. We must not resort to beating or scolding our children." Blake might not have been a Gryffindor, but he was undoubtedly her most cherished student. The thought of him facing such treatment was distressing to her. Moreover, she was taken aback by Dumbledore's uncharacteristic display of anger, something she had never witnessed before. Dumbledore, realizing his lapsing composure, sighed. "Minerva, if only you knew his actions, you'd understand my reaction. The thought of it, this is one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Thankfully, no harm was done, but this child's recklessness with his own life is infuriating." Curious, Professor McGonagall inquired, "What exactly did he do?" She was eager to understand what could drive a man like Dumbledore to such lengths. Dumbledore revealed a crown, explaining, "He possessed something akin to that diary. I discovered it last year and have been studying it in secret, only now choosing to disclose it because he intends to trade it for the diary." He then recounted the tale to Professor McGonagall, who could barely contain her anger upon hearing it. To think he would toy with something as dangerous as a relic of Voldemort, laden with dark curses. What if it had killed him? We would have lost a student of unparalleled talent to a senseless death. The more I think about it, the angrier I become. As McGonagall prepared to take action, Blake, sensing the escalating tension, realized he needed to escape. While the two were preoccupied, he attempted to sneak towards the door, but he had overlooked one person. "Senior Blake, have you ever been enchanted by ancient artifacts left by mysterious individuals?" Ginny's innocent question halted him. She was simply trying to find solace in the idea that if someone as powerful as Blake could be enchanted, then her own susceptibility to the diary's enchantment was not a weakness. Blake, realizing the timing couldn't be worse, gave Ginny a bitter smile. Just then, Dumbledore and McGonagall's stern gazes returned to him, foiling his escape plan. Clearing his throat awkwardly, Blake addressed Ginny. "Perhaps it's best you step outside for a bit. What follows might not be suitable for you to witness. It could get a bit violent." Ginny, taken aback, watched as Dumbledore once again took hold of Blake, this time by the scruff of his neck. "Oh, let's go. Don't stay here. At least, let's preserve some dignity for our senior." Ginny, unsure if Blake had actually been disciplined, watched as he was escorted out of the headmaster's office, and he, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a deepening mystery surrounding the Chamber of Secrets. In the office, Blake appeared unscathed and without any sign of discomfort. Are you okay?" Ginny asked, her voice tinged with embarrassment. She realized her earlier comment might have been a bit thoughtless, considering Blake might have been hurt. Blake noticed Ginny lingering outside. "I'm fine," he reassured her with a smile. "I'm quite resilient. From a logical standpoint, it's usually the person who tries to beat me who ends up being fine." "Come in. They're calling for you," he continued. "But it's quite late. Why are you here at Professor McGonagall's office?" Ginny inquired, puzzled. "Actually, by my calculations, you should have already taken the calming potion Madame Pomfrey prepared for you and fallen asleep in the hospital wing," Blake explained. Ginny replied, "I faint or got something, so I was going to inform Professor Dumbledore. Professor McGonagall was concerned about me returning to the headmaster's office alone, so she escorted me back." "You could have just told Professor McGonagall. Why bother coming here?" Blake questioned, his tone gentle yet firm. "After everything that's happened, you need to rest. Although we managed to thwart Tom's plot in time, a significant amount of your soul energy and vitality was drained. If you don't take proper care of yourself, you might fall ill in the future." Hearing Blake's words, which were filled with concern despite their sternness, Ginny felt a warmth inside her. "I know, so I just finished my business and was heading back to rest. Professor McGonagall has given me a few days off," she explained. Blake, now curious, asked, "So what was it that you needed to tell Dumbledore in person?" The smile on Ginny's face disappeared. "Remember, in the headmaster's office, you mentioned seeing a giant snake." Blake nodded, recalling his conversation with Dumbledore about the basilisk. However, they had only referred to it as a giant snake, not a basilisk. "It's like this. Just as I was about to rest, a memory suddenly resurfaced. It seems the diary had been blocking these memories, but now that the diary has been subdued, the magic suppressing my memories has also faded. So," Ginny paused, gathering her thoughts. "I remembered a very distinct, high-frequency sound. It was like the hissing of a snake. It's the voice of the mysterious man who was controlling and summoning the big snake, and for some reason, I still remember it vividly. This voice is etched into my mind. I tried to explain it to Professor McGonagall, but she couldn't understand, so she took me to Dumbledore," Ginny continued. "Professor McGonagall mentioned that it's parcel tongue, and Professor Dumbledore, having some knowledge of it, should understand its meaning. That's why I was brought here." Blake's interest was piqued. "Oh? You mean you can understand parcel tongue now?" Ginny shook her head. "No, I only remember one sentence." Understanding dawned on Blake. It made sense why Ginny had to come in person. Conveying a sentence in Parseltongue through Professor McGonagall to Dumbledore would have been challenging. "Can you tell me the sentence?" Blake asked. Ginny hesitated for a moment before attempting to replicate the sounds. "Hiss, hiss." Blake stroked his chin thoughtfully. This was indeed what Tom had said in Parseltongue in the Chamber of Secrets. Translated, it meant, "Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four." The basilisk was hidden in the mouth of the Slytherin statue, emerging when Slytherin spoke. It all made sense now. Seeing Blake deep in thought, Ginny said, "I should go in as soon as possible. Let's talk more tomorrow." Blake had initially asked her to come in, but now much time had passed. Ginny hoped that by addressing the matter quickly, she might still have a chance to walk back with Blake for a bit. "I'll go in with you, Ginny," Blake offered, surprising her with a smile and an invitation. "Ah? Are you still going in?" Ginny looked at Blake in astonishment. She remembered Blake had been reprimanded earlier. How could he dare to enter again? But Blake was not deterred. Being scolded or even beaten was inconsequential. Professors Dumbledore and McGonagall were still eagerly awaiting their return. Now, Blake still occasionally receives a silver treasure chest. Feeling the momentum, he decided it was the perfect time to capitalize on the excitement and aim to fulfill their treasure chest quota for the day. After all, the intense emotional swings they were experiencing were rare. Ginny, wanting to spend more time with him, did not object. When Dumbledore saw Blake reappear, his expression was priceless. With a puzzled look, he asked, "Didn't I tell you to go back to sleep? Why are you back here?" "I had a brief conversation with Ginny outside, and something occurred to me," Blake explained. "I believe it's quite important, so I decided to come back and report it." Dumbledore, rubbing his numb palms, decided not to attempt to physically guide the boy again. "Well, speak up then," Professor McGonagall urged. "Let Ginny go first," Blake suggested. Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall exchanged glances, unsure of what Blake was planning. Ginny then relayed to Dumbledore what she had told Blake, including the parseltongue phrase. Dumbledore, deep in thought, finally asked, "Are you certain he used these words to control the giant snake?" "Not entirely," Ginny admitted, "but this phrase must be significant. Otherwise, why would I remember it so vividly?" Dumbledore nodded. "This phrase, I can grasp its surface meaning. However, its deeper implications elude me. Speak to me, Slytherin, the greatest of the four. Indeed, such an abrupt and cryptic sentence does seem to hold a deeper meaning." The room fell silent until Blake broke the silence. "The sentence means exactly what it says. In the Chamber of Secrets, there's a statue of Slytherin. The giant snake was summoned by Tom from the statue's mouth." Dumbledore's pupils dilated. "You're referring to the Chamber of Secrets?" When Blake had previously recounted his experience, he had only described what he saw without making any inferences. Thus, he mentioned seeing Ginny enter a hidden entrance, but did not connect it to the Chamber of Secrets. Consequently, Dumbledore had not linked this incident to the Chamber of Secrets until now. Hidden chambers, dangerous creatures. Dumbledore quickly connected these dots to the Chamber of Secrets incident from 50 years ago. Ding! Shock detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a golden treasure chest. The system's notification sounded. Dumbledore sighed. As I suspected, this is indeed his doing. He looked at Ginny, then turned his attention back to Blake. The entrance to the chamber is in the girls' bathroom? Do you recall how Tom pronounced the words to open it? Since the diary had been dealt with and it was late, Dumbledore had initially planned to discuss these details with Blake the next day. However, he now wanted to confirm his suspicions as soon as possible. Blake smiled. "Can you speak Parseltongue?" "A bit, but I'm not fluent," Dumbledore admitted. "Then you might want to bring someone else who can," Blake suggested. "Who?" Dumbledore inquired. "Nagini. Chapter 259. Ginny. These books can crush me to death, and you say you read them for fun?" "That's a good idea," Dumbledore nodded, acknowledging the suggestion. Parseltongue, the language of snakes, is a rare ability among wizards. Currently, Nagini's form as a large serpent enables her to communicate in this unique language. Blake, on the other hand, could potentially use druid magic to transform into a snake and thus speak Parseltongue. However, he was reluctant to reveal this capability in front of Dumbledore and the others. Unlike the skill to tame animals, which individuals like Newt or Hagrid possess, transforming into various animals is not a common ability. Moreover, druidic transformation is not easily explained by conventional transfiguration magic. Therefore, with Nagini available to assist, Blake decided against demonstrating his unique skill, preferring to avoid the complexity of explaining it. "Minerva, please escort Miss Weasley back to her quarters to rest." "Blake, let's proceed to the entrance of the Chamber of Secrets," Dumbledore declared, ready to take action. However, Blake interjected, "Please wait, Professor. If you were aware of the true nature of the monster within, you might not be so eager to confront it." Dumbledore, puzzled, inquired, "Isn't it just a giant snake?" From Blake's description, the creature was indeed large, but Dumbledore felt confident in his ability to handle such a threat. His attention then shifted to the crown resting on the table, a realization dawning on him. This was Ravenclaw's diadem, long missing and transformed into a Horcrux by Voldemort. Blake had interacted with this Horcrux for over a year, potentially learning valuable information from the residual soul within. "Did you discover anything from the crown?" Dumbledore asked. "He revealed some details, but uncovering all his secrets is nearly impossible," Blake replied. Dumbledore was impressed by Blake's ability to extract any information at all. Since they were not leaving immediately, Dumbledore conjured several chairs and a table, complete with hot black tea, inviting everyone to sit and enjoy a brief respite. Blake grimaced at the tea, not out of dislike for the beverage itself, but rather for Dumbledore's particular blend. Noticing Blake's reluctance, Dumbledore conjured a glass of sweet pumpkin juice and offered it to him. Blake eagerly accepted, savoring the drink with a satisfied sigh. "Based on the information I've gathered, combined with Ginny's account, I've formulated some theories," Blake began, drawing attention back to the matter at hand. "What theories?" Dumbledore inquired, intrigued. "I've learned something about an event that occurred 50 years ago," Blake said, gesturing towards the crown. He didn't actually learn about the Chamber of Secrets from the diadem, but remembered the details from the original story. Nonetheless, he found it convenient to attribute his knowledge to the crown, sparing himself the need for lengthy explanations. Dumbledore, taking the bait, asked, "You're aware of the Chamber of Secrets incident from 50 years ago?" "Yes, Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts because he was wrongly accused by Voldemort, correct?" Blake responded. Dumbledore's expression turned somber. "Indeed, you're correct. I've always known Hagrid was innocent, but—" He paused, reflecting on the injustice. One was seen as an oddity, while the other was a model student, admired by all. After the incident, people were quick to side with Tom, without substantial evidence or even a glimpse of the supposed monster. Hagrid was wrongfully accused, and the real culprit went unpunished, even receiving a trophy for the Special Contribution Award. This trophy still resides in the trophy room at Hogwarts, a stark reminder of the injustice that occurred. Dumbledore, reflecting on the past, couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness whenever he thought about Hagrid's situation. Hagrid had always had a passion for magical creatures, a trait he shared with Blake. Blake, with a knowing smile, revealed his reluctance to destroy Tom Riddle's diary immediately. "This diary is crucial evidence that could exonerate Hagrid," he argued. "It's inconceivable that no one in the Ministry of Magic recognizes a Horcrux for what it is. If they acknowledge that Tom Riddle is Voldemort, they must see the flaws in the case against Hagrid. The testimony of someone who created a Horcrux at 16 is inherently unreliable. How can we stand by and watch Hagrid suffer under this false accusation?" Dumbledore was taken aback by this perspective. His initial instinct upon discovering Voldemort's Horcrux was to destroy it, focusing solely on the means to defeat Voldemort. The idea that the Horcrux could serve as evidence to clear Hagrid's name had never occurred to him. Blake's earnestness made Dumbledore realize his oversight, filling him with a sense of guilt. "You're right," Dumbledore conceded. "Once we've dealt with the Chamber of Secrets, we'll have all the evidence we need. I'll personally ensure Hagrid's name is cleared at the Ministry of Magic." Blake nodded in agreement, emphasizing the importance of addressing the true menace within the Chamber of Secrets as part of vindicating Hagrid. "Speaking of which, I believe you're already aware of the creature lurking there," Blake continued, referencing the giant snake he encountered and connecting it with the testimony of Myrtle, the girl who died 50 years ago, as well as Ginny's manipulated actions. Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Ginny listened intently, curious about Blake's deduction. The legend of the Chamber of Secrets was well known, yet vague, only revealing that it was created by Slytherin to house a monster intended to purge the school of Muggle-born wizards. Beyond that, the specifics of the monster remained a mystery. To substantiate his claims, Blake began pulling books out of his pocket, placing a thick volume on the table before quickly dismissing it and searching for another. "Not this one, nor this," Blake muttered, continuing his search and piling nearly 10 hefty books on Dumbledore's desk, which groaned under the weight. Ginny watched in amazement, realizing the extent of Blake's knowledge and preparation. The sight of so many books emerging from such a small pocket was astonishing, and it shed light on Blake's formidable capabilities. Dumbledore, observing the overloaded table, concluded that it might need reinforcement to withstand the weight of Blake's extensive library. The scene underscored the depth of Blake's research and his commitment to uncovering the truth, setting the stage for a thorough investigation into the Chamber of Secrets and the monster within. Blake was taken aback by a voice emanating from the other side of the towering stack of books. "Found it! This is the one!" The books, previously stacked high, had created a barrier between Blake and the others. With a casual wave of his hand, Blake commanded all the books to fly back into his pocket, leaving only the book he was holding. The table, nearly buckling under the weight, let out a squeak of relief. "Ahem. Sorry, I tend to use too many books for my research." Blake apologized, a hint of embarrassment in his voice. Ginny stared at Blake, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and admiration. The sheer volume of books he had been consulting for entertainment was astounding. She wondered how he could possibly remember the exact content of each book from such a vast collection. The thought of the physical weight of those books alone was overwhelming. Ginny's attention was then drawn to the book Blake was holding. The title, Encyclopedia of Magical Animals and Plants, was printed on its slightly faded cover. Blake quickly flipped through the pages, then turned the book to face Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, and the others, pushing it forward for them to see. "That's no ordinary giant snake. It's a basilisk, also known as the King of Serpents," Blake announced. The page he had opened depicted a lifelike green snake. "A basilisk is hatched from a chicken egg incubated by a toad," he read, aloud. "Its deadly fangs are not its only weapon. Its gaze can kill anyone who looks directly into its eyes. The basilisk is a mortal enemy to spiders, which flee from its presence. However, its weakness is the crowing of a rooster, which is fatal to it." Professor McGonagall and the others absorbed the information in silence, their expressions growing increasingly grave. Blake continued, "The primary reason I believe the giant snake we encountered is a basilisk is its striking resemblance to the description in this book. Additionally, Myrtle's account of her death aligns with the basilisk's lethal gaze. She mentioned seeing a pair of yellow pupils before losing consciousness." Blake knew Dumbledore was unlikely to verify this with Myrtle directly. "The secondary reason stems from Ginny's experience," Blake added. Ginny nodded in agreement, recalling how she had woken up near Hagrid's chicken coop without understanding why. "It seems I was searching for roosters, though I can't fathom why," she admitted, puzzled. Blake pointed to the relevant text in the book. "The basilisk's vulnerability to roosters explains why Tom would never allow them near the castle. He must have visited the Chamber of Secrets tonight to ensure the basilisk was still alive after all these years. I suspect he intended to use Ginny to eliminate Hagrid's roosters before unleashing the basilisk on the students, replicating the horror from 50 years ago." As Blake concluded, a chilling silence enveloped the room. Dumbledore and McGonagall were struck by the horrifying implications of Blake's deductions. The thought of the basilisk being unleashed upon an unsuspecting student gathering, such as the dining hall during dinner, was nightmarish. Professor McGonagall felt a cold shiver run down her spine, while Dumbledore regarded Blake with a newfound respect and gratitude. "We are incredibly fortunate you were there tonight," Dumbledore said, the gravity of the situation evident in his tone. "Had you not noticed something amiss with Ginny, Tom might have succeeded in using her to unleash the basilisk, leading to untold tragedy." Blake had witnessed a real basilisk. Hidden in the shadows, he had observed the creature with his own eyes. Had Blake and the basilisk inadvertently made eye contact, he would have met a fatal end. Dumbledore, unaware of Blake's immunity to the basilisk's gaze due to his true eye skill, assumed Blake's safety was merely a stroke of luck, believing he had only seen the basilisk from a distance. Dumbledore was consumed with guilt. "How could I have been so negligent?" he lamented. "Blake took such a risk to thwart a major conspiracy, and I reprimanded him. I am truly at fault." Unbeknownst to Blake, Dumbledore was wrestling with these thoughts. Blake then explained, "This is precisely why I urged caution against rushing to open the Chamber of Secrets and confront the beast. Although I wasn't entirely certain the creature in the chamber was a basilisk, Even a slight chance warranted extreme caution. We must be thoroughly prepared before we act. Dumbledore sighed, gratitude evident in his voice. Thank you, Blake. The thought of what could have happened had you not intervened is horrifying. The incident from 50 years ago still haunts me. He reflected on his past experience with Tom Riddle. Back then, only one girl had died, not because the basilisk was incapable of more, but because Tom knew that another death would lead to Hogwarts closure. Returning to the detestable orphanage was a fate Tom was desperate to avoid, so he ceased opening the chamber and falsely accused Hagrid, preventing further casualties. Now, with Tom having become a Horcrux, the fear of Hogwarts closing was no longer a deterrent. A basilisk unleashed without restraint would spell disaster. Professor, there's no need for concern now, Blake reassured. Our next steps are to eliminate the basilisk and prevent any future threats. Once that's done, this ordeal will be behind us. Chapter 260. Ginny. Tears. Blake is so great. Seeing the serious expressions on everyone's faces, Blake spoke softly. Actually, there's no need for worry at this moment. In the Chamber of Secrets, the only real threat is the basilisk. Its inactivity over the years suggests that it requires someone to summon it. Now, with the diary that can call upon it in our possession, everyone is essentially safe. However, we cannot ignore the presence of such a creature within the school. It's akin to a ticking time bomb. Ginny, puzzled, inquired, "What's a time bomb?" "It's a weapon that explodes after a set period. A dangerous weapon," Blake tried to explain. Professor McGonagall interjected, "This issue must be addressed immediately." But the basilisk poses a great danger. Dealing with it carelessly could be fatal. We need to be thoroughly prepared and ensure the safety of all students. How about we handle this during the holidays? We could wait until the students have left for the break before we deal with the basilisk, she suggested. Dumbledore pondered for a moment before shaking his head. While we are theoretically safe for now, waiting until the holidays could invite unforeseen risks. For the safety of all students, we must eliminate any threats as soon as possible. I plan to consult with magical zoologists and experienced wizards to devise a cautious plan. Once ready, I intend to evacuate the students from the castle for 3 days. Professor McGonagall looked at Dumbledore, surprised. An emergency evacuation? The Ministry of Magic and the school board might have concerns. Trust me, Minerva, they will understand. Nothing is more important than our students' safety, Dumbledore assured her. Turning to Ginny, he said, "Miss Weasley, please keep tonight's discussion confidential for now. Premature disclosure could cause unnecessary panic among the students." Ginny nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The idea of a basilisk lurking in the school was unsettling, to say the least. Dumbledore then addressed Blake. "I'm at a loss for words. You've preemptively thwarted a significant conspiracy and shed light on a case that's been cold for 50 years. However, since we cannot announce this publicly yet, I can only offer my gratitude on behalf of Hogwarts faculty and students. Once the basilisk issue is resolved, your contributions will be formally recognized, and you will receive the accolades you deserve." Blake waved off the praise. "I'm not concerned with awards or honors. I did what I thought was necessary. Besides, handling this matter discreetly is preferable to avoid causing panic." Blake's decision to intervene was driven by the lethal unpredictability of the basilisk. In the original story, the creature only petrified several individuals, thanks to their indirect encounters with it. However, without such fortunate circumstances, the outcomes could have been fatal. With the added variables in this altered world, including his and Cassandra's presence, Blake refused to gamble with the lives of those he cared about. When Blake suggested that it would be wise to deal with the basilisk and secure the safety of Hogwarts, Dumbledore perceived it as a modest understatement from the young student. It's common for young people to seek recognition for their achievements, and despite Blake's insistence on not wanting public acknowledgement, Dumbledore knew the school couldn't overlook such a significant contribution. At that moment, Ginny's gaze was fixed on Blake, filled with admiration. Having been saved by him from a perilous situation, her trust in him was absolute. She was deeply impressed by Blake's selflessness, as he sought nothing in return for his actions. In her eyes, Blake's humility and willingness to keep his deeds a secret to prevent panic among the students elevated him to a status of genuine heroism, a stark contrast to how she imagined she would react in a similar situation. Blake, lost in thought, was unaware of the impact his words and actions had on Ginny. He continued to explain the importance of keeping Voldemort in the dark about the tampering with his Horcruxes. He emphasized the potential danger if Voldemort, upon his inevitable return, decided to create new, unknown Horcruxes, complicating their efforts to finally defeat him. Dumbledore, initially surprised, came to realize Blake's genuine concern for the greater good, far beyond seeking personal glory. The system, detecting the strong emotions stirred by Blake's selflessness, rewarded him with several silver treasure chests, leaving Blake puzzled by this unexpected bounty. Professor McGonagall, visibly moved by Blake's altruism, assured him that the school would find a way to appropriately reward him, even if the details of his heroism couldn't be made public immediately. After leaving Dumbledore's office in the early hours, Ginny, escorted back to the hospital wing by McGonagall, cast a longing look back at Blake. As Blake made his way to the Hufflepuff common room, he felt a sense of relief, knowing the threats of the Basilisk and the Chamber of Secrets were behind them. Hogwarts would be safer this year. He even exchanged a friendly greeting with Mr. Filch, the caretaker, a gesture that would surely have surprised Fred and George Weasley. Returning to his dormitory, Blake quickly fell into a deep sleep, his mind at ease after the night's events, unaware of the lasting impression his actions had left on those around him. Blake felt a gentle peck at his hand and slowly opened his eyes to the light of dawn. Turning to his right, he saw Fox, his pet, squatting on the bed, tilting its head curiously at him. "Oh, good morning, Fox," Blake greeted, his hand brushing over Fox's head, feeling the warmth of its fur. Fox, in response, nudged something across the bed with its paw. Pushing himself up, Blake's gaze immediately fell on the familiar diary. "Choo, choo, choo!" Fox chirped, confirming Blake had received the diary before gently pecking the back of Blake's hand and disappearing with a soft pop. Blake picked up Tom's diary, a sense of relief washing over him. Dumbledore had chosen to trust him after all. Blake understood that Dumbledore was acting for the greater good. His revelations the previous night, claiming to have received crucial information from the Crown that saved Hogwarts from a dire catastrophe, had undoubtedly forced Dumbledore to recognize Blake's unique abilities. Despite the dangers of delving further into the mysteries of Horcruxes, Blake felt the potential to save more lives made the risk worthwhile. The delayed delivery of the diary made sense to Blake now. Dumbledore must have wrestled with his decision throughout the night, ultimately choosing to let Blake continue his risky endeavor rather than confronting him directly. Securing the diary in his system warehouse where it would be safe from harm, Blake prepared for the day. October had brought a chill to Hogwarts, and as he entered the auditorium for breakfast, he noticed the Weasley twins, their expressions serene. Dumbledore had evidently cautioned the entire Weasley family against spreading word of last night's events. Even Mr. Weasley had, for the moment, suppressed his desire to confront Lucius Malfoy. Blake made his way past the long tables of Gryffindors, Ravenclaws, and Slytherins, offering warm greetings to his friends, before taking his seat at the Hufflepuff table. Cedric Diggory watched him with a mix of envy and jealousy, bemused by Blake's popularity, especially among the girls. As Blake was about to enjoy his usual breakfast, a fragrant breeze announced the approach of someone. Turning, he was surprised to find Ginny Weasley standing close by. Across the room, at the Gryffindor table, Ron accidentally shattered a plate, while the twins, Percy and Mr. Weasley, shot fierce glares in Blake's direction. Ginny, oblivious to her brother's reactions, softly thanked Blake for his help the previous night before quickly exiting the auditorium. The incident seemed to pass without much fuss, yet unnoticed by many, signs of tension were evident. Assandra's fork was bent out of shape, Hermione's book was wrinkled, and Hannah had dropped her pumpkin pie onto the table, a silent testament to the undercurrents of emotion stirred by the morning's events. Chapter 261, Hermione, he will grow up one day anyway. What am I anxious about? Late October brought with it a relentless spell of rainy weather, casting a gloom over everyone's spirits. The castle hallways, usually bustling with the chatter and laughter of students, now echoed with the sound of rain tapping against the windows. When Harry Potter entered the castle, drenched from head to toe and carrying his muddy broom, the atmosphere shifted. Even from the second floor, the irate bellowing of Argus Filch, the caretaker, was unmistakable. "Filthy creatures! You're all filthy!" Filch shouted, his voice laced with frustration. "It's just a bit of mud," Harry muttered, looking rather helpless. "A bit of mud?" Filch retorted, incredulous. "Do you have any idea how much effort it takes to clean this up? It'll cost me at least 10 of my magic scrolls." The tension in the air was palpable until Blake, a fellow student, intervened. "Mr. Filch, how have you been lately?" he asked, his tone polite and calm. Filch's demeanor softened at the sight of Blake. "Not too well, I'm afraid. The students keep making a mess of the castle, especially in this dreadful weather," he replied, his voice losing some of its earlier edge. Blake nodded sympathetically, then, with a flick of his wand, he effortlessly cleaned the mud from the floor and Harry's clothes. "Scourgify!" he exclaimed, and the mess vanished instantly. Filch watched, a hint of envy in his eyes. How he wished he could wield a wand with such ease instead of relying on his homemade magic scrolls. Still, being able to use magic at all was a significant improvement from before. "Thank you, Blake. You've saved me a great deal of trouble," Filch said, his tone genuinely grateful. Blake then inquired about Filch's progress with ancient rune literature, offering encouragement and even presenting him with a homemade potion to enhance memory. "Take it 3 times a day after meals. A small spoonful each time should do. If you find it helpful, feel free to let me know," Blake advised, handing Filch a bottle filled with a purple glowing liquid. Filch accepted the potion with joy, marveling at the thought of such a remedy. "This is wonderful. Thank you, Blake." As Blake and a now calm Filch parted ways, Harry looked on in awe. The respect he felt for Blake grew exponentially, akin to a surging river or an uncontrollable flood. Noticing Harry's admiration, Blake offered him a piece of advice. "Next time, try to clean off the mud before coming inside. It'll make Mr. Filch's job a lot easier," he said with a smile. Harry nodded, taking the advice to heart. Then, shifting the topic, he mentioned the recent developments with the Slytherin Quidditch team. "Malfoy has joined as their seeker," he said, a hint of concern in his voice. Blake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, bought his way in with money, did he?" Harry was surprised. "How did you know?" "It's either talent or wealth that gets you places here. And in Malfoy's case, it's definitely the latter," Blake mused, his tone light but insightful. Harry sighed, sharing his worries about the upcoming Quidditch match. The entire Slytherin team had been outfitted with the latest Nimbus 2001 brooms, courtesy of Malfoy's wealth. This put Harry and his team at a disadvantage, as his Nimbus 2000, once the pride of Hogwarts, was now outclassed. Blake placed a reassuring hand on Harry's shoulder. "Don't worry, a broom doesn't make the player. It's the skill that counts," he said, confidence in his voice. Harry looked at Blake, his worry momentarily eased by the conviction in his friend's words. Perhaps there was hope yet. Blake, the captain of the Hufflepuff Quidditch team, remained unfazed upon hearing that their rivals had significantly upgraded their equipment. "What's there to worry about? Money doesn't guarantee victory," Blake stated confidently. He believed in the power of ingenuity over wealth. To him, an old broom was not necessarily a disadvantage. With his skills in alchemy, he was certain he could enhance their performance without the need for expensive new brooms. Determined to prove his point, Blake summoned all members of the Hufflepuff Quidditch team to the common room after school, instructing them to bring their brooms and money bags. The team members, including Cedric, were apprehensive, fearing a grueling training session similar to those conducted by Oliver Wood of Gryffindor. However, to their surprise, Blake simply collected their brooms for modification and then treated them to a meal, leaving them bewildered and relieved at his unexpected generosity. Blake chose a secret passage as his workshop for the broom modifications. As he walked, the brooms levitated and followed him, attracting curious glances from passers-by. Upon reaching the secret base, he found it unusually empty, as it was typically a gathering place for his friends during free periods. Meanwhile, in the dueling club, Hermione Granger faced off against Cassandra, but was quickly disarmed. Frustrated by her defeat, Hermione stepped aside, making way for Hannah Abbott, who reluctantly agreed to duel Cassandra next. Despite her reservations, Hannah knew she couldn't refuse the challenge. As the duel commenced, Hermione, still brooding over Blake's recent and inexplicable closeness with Ginny Weasley, barely noticed as Hannah was swiftly defeated and sent sliding across the floor to her. The narrative unfolds with a blend of competition, camaraderie, and intrigue among the students of Hogwarts, showcasing their diverse talents and the dynamics of their relationships. Hannah spoke weakly, beat. Hermione, feeling a mix of concern and helplessness, assisted her to her feet. "By the way, does your plan really work? Are you sure Blake will actually come to us?" Cassandra replied with unwavering confidence. "Of course, he's bound to notice our absence soon. Trust me, he'll seek us out before long, and then we can turn the tables on him." Hermione, observing Cassandra's confident smile, couldn't help but express her doubts. "Is there a chance he might not even realize we're gone?" "Impossible. Absolutely impossible." Cassandra's voice was filled with certainty. As night fell, the Duel Club's spacious classroom was nearly empty. Cassandra, overwhelmed by anxiety, found herself staring blankly at the ceiling. This lapse in focus allowed Hermione to catch her off guard and knock her down during their practice duel. This time, however, Cassandra had no desire to get back up. The moment of truth had passed. If Blake had intended to come, he would have done so already. "It's impossible. How could he not notice our absence? Doesn't he despise being alone above all else?" Hermione pondered aloud, crouching in front of Cassandra. Could it be that it doesn't matter to him if he noticed we were gone? After all, besides us, he could easily find company in Ginny, Chuzhang, Penello. Cassandra's face turned pale at the realization. Ah, the nerve of him! Cassandra, who had maintained her composure throughout the day, was finally overwhelmed by frustration. She stood up abruptly. "Where are you going?" Hermione inquired. "I'm going to find him. I need to see who he's chosen to spend his time with," Cassandra declared. "Go ahead. I'm heading back to sleep," Hermione replied casually. "I've been practicing dueling all day, and I'm exhausted." Hannah began to pack up her snacks, adding, "I'm heading back too. I need to grab some food. I'm starving." Cassandra looked at them, surprised by their lack of urgency. "There's no point in fretting," Hermione said as she gathered her belongings. "Have you considered that maybe he hasn't given this situation much thought and simply sees us as friends? So, I'm not in a rush. He'll come around eventually, right?" With that, Hermione slung her school bag over her shoulder and headed for the classroom door. As Hannah walked past the stunned Cassandra, she paused to add, "You know, I think he doesn't like being controlled by anyone, no matter who it is." With nothing more to say, Hannah followed Hermione out of the room. Cassandra, taken aback, exclaimed, "What, are you suggesting I'm controlling?" I didn't mean that. Who wants to control him?" After speaking, Cassandra was suddenly struck by a wave of realization and dizziness. Did I actually try to control him? Chapter 262. Blake, you are the devil. Even Satan would feel like an angel next to you. On a chilly Saturday morning, Cedric was nestled comfortably in his warm bed, lost in a sweet dream. Abruptly, his tranquility was shattered as his quilt was yanked away, exposing him to the biting cold. With a startled yelp, he sat up. "Ah!" he exclaimed, his voice laced with disbelief. What are you doing?" He quickly grabbed the quilt and wrapped it around his chest protectively. The first light of dawn was just beginning to break as Blake emerged from the shadows. "What am I doing? Training, of course," he declared with a sinister chuckle. "But today is Saturday," Cedric protested, his voice tinged with desperation. "Saturday? Isn't that the perfect day for training?" Blake retorted, seemingly oblivious to Cedric's dismay. "No, Blake, this is too much. Look, it's pouring rain outside." Cedric gestured towards the window, where heavy rain lashed against the glass. The idea of leaving a warm bed to train in such dreadful weather seemed beyond the bounds of reason, even to Wood, the notorious training enthusiast next door. "Ah, Blake, you are the devil incarnate. Even Satan himself would seem like an angel in comparison," Cedric lamented, recalling how he had once persuaded Blake to take on the role of captain, a decision he now deeply regretted. Despite his protests, Cedric found himself being dragged out of bed by Blake. Soon after, all the Hufflepuff players had assembled, none daring to defy Blake's formidable will. Even the comfort of their beds was no sanctuary from his strength. Gathered in the Hufflepuff common room, the team members, still groggy and clad in their training gear, huddled by the fireplace. "Come on, show some spirit. Don't look so glum," Blake encouraged, though his words did little to lift the mood, especially with the sound of thunder rumbling ominously outside. "You're asking us to risk our lives, Captain. There's a thunderstorm brewing." Cedric's voice was tinged with a mix of fear and resignation. "It's not a problem. The rain will stop," Blake assured him nonchalantly, his confidence bordering on recklessness. Cedric could only stare in disbelief. Blake's disregard for the weather was almost devilish in its audacity. As Blake handed out the brooms, he announced, "Okay, let's go." The players sighed resignedly and followed him to the castle's entrance hall, where Filch had already opened the doors. The cold wind whipped the rain into the hall, soaking their robes. Cedric, with a heavy heart, prepared to step into the downpour, followed by his teammates. However, Blake stopped them. "What are you doing? Do you really want to get soaked?" he asked, as if the notion was absurd. Confused, the team exchanged glances. They had been under the impression that training in the rain was the plan. "I told you, the rain will stop soon. Just wait a moment," Blake said, his tone mysterious. "How do you know the rain will stop?" Cedric asked, skepticism clear in his voice. "Because I'll make it stop," Blake declared, his confidence bordering on arrogance. Cedric scoffed. "If you can make this rain stop, I'll eat noodles while standing on my head." "Really? What if I add some chili powder to those noodles? Would that be okay?" Blake teased. "No way. You couldn't possibly do it anyway," Cedric retorted, his bravado evident. Blake simply smiled and drew his wand. With a swift motion, he sent a bolt of lightning into the sky. The dark clouds that had lingered over Hogwarts for weeks began to disperse, and the thunder faded into the distance. Before long, the sky cleared, revealing the blue expanse for the first time in half a month. Blake coolly pocketed his wand, acting as if he had merely performed a trivial task. The team stared in stunned silence, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Blake had indeed stopped the rain, a feat that seemed impossible. Ding! Shock detected! The magical notification chimed, acknowledging the astonishment of those present. Dispelling thunderstorms, it turned out, was a mere basic operation for Blake, something he had previously demonstrated during his adventure with Hagrid to find Harry. The application of the weather spell was a trivial matter for Blake, who had mastered weather spells to an unparalleled degree. However, for the Hufflepuff Quidditch team, witnessing such a feat was nothing short of astonishing. They had seen Dumbledore perform similar magic without batting an eye, but Blake's casual display left them in awe. As the rain ceased, Blake playfully teased Cedric about his unconventional training methods, suggesting he eat noodles while standing upside down, much to Cedric's dismay. The team, still reeling from the spectacle of the dispersed thunderstorm, followed Blake out into the now sunny Quidditch pitch, their spirits lifted by the warm sunshine. Despite their initial reluctance to wake up early for training, they found themselves excited by Blake's display of magical prowess. Everyone, except Cedric, who was preoccupied with the thought of eating noodles in such a peculiar manner, bombarded Blake with questions about the spell he used. Blake, unfazed by their curiosity, playfully dismissed their inquiries, suggesting that he simply willed the rain to stop. His nonchalant response only added to his mystique, leaving the team in awe of his abilities. As they gathered on the pitch, Blake shifted the focus to the day's training agenda, which involved testing their brooms. The team was puzzled, looking at their familiar brooms and wondering how they could be considered new. They speculated whether Blake intended to surprise them with new brooms, much like Draco Malfoy had done for the Slytherin team. However, Blake quickly dispelled that notion, revealing that he had secretly upgraded their brooms to enhance their performance. Cedric, examining his comet broom, found no visible signs of modification, which Blake proudly claimed was the mark of a masterful transformation. Skeptical, but intrigued, the team decided to test the brooms themselves. Cedric, eager to try out his modified broom, was about to take off when Blake urgently stopped him. Blake had a good reason for his caution. Cedric's broom had undergone the most extensive modifications, especially since, as Hufflepuff's Seeker, His broom needed to be faster than those of other seekers to compensate for any skill disparity. This revelation only heightened the team's anticipation. As they prepared to witness the capabilities of their newly enhanced brooms, they realized that Blake's unconventional methods and mysterious demeanor might just lead them to new heights, both literally and figuratively, in the world of Quidditch. Catching the golden snitch is no small feat, a task seemingly reserved for the likes of Malfoy or Harry, whose flying skills are in a league of their own. However, Blake harbored a desire for Cedric to shine in his own right. What could be more glorious than clinching the game by capturing the golden snitch himself? To this end, Blake's modifications to Cedric's broomstick were nothing short of transformative, elevating a mundane broom into the echelons of a high-performance racing machine. Consequently, a mere gentle push was all that was required for an explosive takeoff. Yet, habituated to the vigorous exertion needed to launch the unmodified broom, Cedric applied excessive force. The result was akin to flooring the accelerator in a supercar, propelling him into the air with a startled scream. "Ah! Blake!" His voice dwindled into the distance as he became a mere speck in the sky. Blake, unfazed and with a hint of amusement, watched Cedric's rapid ascent. "Hey, who told you to take off without heeding my advice?" he muttered, shaking his head in mild exasperation. Despite the dramatic takeoff, Blake was confident in Cedric's flying abilities, certain he would quickly adapt to the broom's enhanced capabilities and return safely. Turning his attention back to the ground, Blake noticed the rest of the team eyeing him with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Why haven't you taken off yet? Are you waiting for me to serve dinner?" he joked, only to be met with nervous glances. "No, we thought you might have more to say," one teammate ventured, their voice tinged with unease. Cedric's harrowing experience had served as a cautionary tale, leaving them hesitant to replicate his mistake. "I don't have anything else to add, except, when taking off, push gently. You'll need to acquaint yourselves with the broom's other features on your own. That's the focus of today's training," Blake clarified. Moments later, the Quidditch pitch erupted in jubilant cheers from the Hufflepuff players, their initial trepidation giving way to exhilaration. Meanwhile, Blake received a series of system notifications, congratulating him on earning various treasure chests. Yet, as he watched Cedric, still gleefully airborne, Blake couldn't help but feel slighted. A silver treasure chest for such a legendary feat? Is this some kind of joke? He grumbled internally, half-jokingly vowing to exact a playful revenge on Cedric later. In the principal's office, Dumbledore positioned his chair by the window, basking in the sunlight. Sipping his drink, he gazed out at the lively scene unfolding on the Quidditch pitch, a smile playing on his lips. "Oh, to be young again," he mused, his thoughts tinged with a blend of nostalgia and contentment. Chapter 263, Cassandra. He scolded me, but he has me in his heart. Expelliarmus! A wand soared into the air, twirled gracefully, and then descended into Cassandra's waiting hand. "Wow, Cassandra, you're incredible. Could you teach me?" Daphne Greengrass massaged her sore right hand, her voice laced with admiration. Cassandra gave a slight nod, her expression devoid of pride. Truth be told, she sensed Daphne's insincerity. It seemed as though Daphne was merely trying to curry favor with her. After all, sparring with Cassandra didn't present the same level of challenge as practicing with Hannah, because Daphne hadn't truly prepared to attack at all. "Why did you decide to practice dueling with me today?" Cassandra inquired, her tone curious yet cautious. "Aren't you usually with Pansy Parkinson?" In the past, Daphne Greengrass was often seen as Pansy Parkinson's sidekick. Their shared belief in the superiority of purebloods meant they had little in common with Cassandra, who valued ability above lineage. Thus, Daphne's sudden overture took Cassandra by surprise. "I just want to be friends with you," Daphne declared. "After all, we're both from pureblood families. Purebloods should stick together. Besides, compared to those Muggle-borns, I think we're more suited to be friends," Daphne added, her words laced with a hint of disdain. Cassandra's brow furrowed slightly at this. "Those Muggle-borns you're talking about, who are you referring to?" Daphne retrieved her wand. "I heard about you and that girl named Hermione Granger. She and I are not friends," Cassandra stated emphatically. Although Hermione often kept her company, it was mostly due to external pressures, and they maintained a facade of harmony to avoid further conflict. But in reality, Hermione was her adversary, her foremost rival. Cassandra had initially thought Blake would be her greatest challenge, but she soon realized that Blake was in a league of his own, far beyond her reach. Thus, she resolved to vie with Hermione for second place, whether in academic achievements or emotional matters. "That's a relief. I was worried," Daphne said with a relieved smile, mistakenly believing Cassandra shared her views on pure-blood solidarity. "I have no interest in pure-blood supremacy, Greengrass," Cassandra retorted sharply. "My only criterion for friendship or enmity is strength." Cassandra's gaze was piercing as she looked down at Daphne. "So, if you wish to be my friend or foe, you'd better demonstrate a level of ability that commands my respect." Hermione's talent was the only reason Cassandra took her seriously. And as for Blake, it was his exceptional talents and abilities that stirred something more within her. Without sufficient capability, one couldn't even qualify as her adversary. Such was the essence of Cassandra. Daphne, understanding Cassandra's unspoken challenge, stepped back and prepared herself. "Then let me show you what a pure blood can truly achieve." Cassandra observed Daphne quietly, her wand idly twirling in her hand, seemingly unimpressed. Daphne, feeling belittled and fueled by anger, was determined to prove her worth. "Collapse!" she shouted, launching the first spell. But Cassandra, whose dueling prowess had been honed by Blake, effortlessly dodged the spell. "Your intention is too obvious," she remarked coolly before casting Expelliarmus. Once again, Daphne's wand was sent flying into Cassandra's hand. "It seems you're not yet worthy to be my friend," Cassandra stated matter-of-factly. Daphne, teeth clenched in frustration, met Cassandra's gaze. "It seems you're quite unconvinced. So, how about another try? I have plenty of time today," Cassandra offered, tossing the wand back to Daphne. Lately, Cassandra had been feeling particularly irritable. Blake hadn't sought her out for several days. The thought of Hermione's words, "Is there a possibility he didn't even notice you were missing?" infuriated her even more. Thus, Daphne Greengrass had unwittingly become the target of Cassandra's frustra tie-in. When Blake arrived at the spacious classroom where the duel club practiced, he immediately noticed Cassandra forcefully knocking a brown-haired girl, Daphne, several meters away. Daphne crumpled to the ground, tears streaming down her face. Blake muttered to himself, feeling a twinge of concern. "Crying? That seems a bit harsh, doesn't it?" At that moment, Cassandra, having just sent Daphne flying across the room, caught sight of Blake at the entrance. Her heart skipped a beat. "Finally, you decide to show up. Do you have any idea how long I've been waiting for you?" she thought, her emotions a whirlwind of excitement and relief, her focus entirely shifting to Blake. Daphne, seizing the opportunity while Cassandra was distracted, wiped away her tears. She noticed her wand was still firmly in her grasp. Fueled by the injustice she had endured, Daphne raised her wand, her voice trembling but determined. "Incendio!" Cassandra, caught off guard, could barely react. "Stop the curse immediately!" Blake intervened swiftly, positioning himself in front of Cassandra. He turned to Daphne, his tone a mix of anger and disbelief. "Who do you think you are? Aren't you aware of the duel club's rules? We strictly forbid the use of curses against fellow students. Do you realize the severity of your actions? That curse could have caused serious burns." Daphne's resolve crumbled, and her wand clattered to the floor. She was immediately filled with regret. Her intention had been to forge a friendship with Cassandra, not to escalate their conflict. "This isn't just about my relationship with Cassandra," she thought, panic rising. It could also affect the relationship between the Greengrass and Worley families. She was relieved that Blake had intervened, preventing the curse from hitting its mark and leaving room for reconciliation. Cassandra, still in shock from the near miss, was silently grateful for Blake's timely intervention. The thought of being disfigured, even temporarily, was unbearable, especially in front of Blake. I'm sorry," Daphne managed to say through her tears, her regret genuine. Blake then turned his attention to Cassandra, his expression stern. "And you? Have you forgotten the lessons I've taught you? A duel isn't over until your opponent is disarmed. Your distraction could have cost you dearly. Pride has no place in battle. It's a vulnerability." Cassandra felt a surge of emotions, her eyes welling up. She was on the verge of lashing out at Blake for his harsh words when he suddenly softened, his blue eyes conveying deep concern. I'm being strict because I can't bear the thought of something happening to you. Do you understand? I can't lose you. Cassandra was speechless, her anger dissipating as quickly as it had flared. Before she could fully process her emotions, Blake gently took her hand, drawing her attention to a small green gem he placed on her bracelet, a gift he had given her previously, crafted from the feathers of a fooper. The gem seamlessly integrated into the bracelet, its presence a silent promise of protection. This will keep you safe in dire situations, but I hope it never has to be used because that would mean you're in grave danger, Blake explained, his voice soft but earnest. Cassandra, still reeling from the roller coaster of emotions, finally understood the depth of Blake's concern. His earlier rebuke was not out of anger, but out of a fear of losing her. The realization filled her with an unexpected warmth. I understand my mistake, and I'll be more careful in the future, Cassandra promised, her voice barely above a whisper, her heart swelling with a newfound appreciation for Blake's complex but genuine care. Cassandra responded softly, her demeanor unexpectedly gentle. Daphne Greengrass, on the other hand, was left utterly bewildered. She couldn't fathom how her loud and angry attempts to communicate, which were essentially her way of extending an olive branch, were met with such a calm and cheerful response. It was as if the previous confrontation hadn't happened at all. Daphne found herself questioning the logic of her actions, wondering if her efforts to forge a friendship were in vain. Feeling defeated, Daphne lamented to herself, "Dad, it looks like I won't be able to fulfill the task of fostering a good relationship between the Greengrass and the Woolley families." Overwhelmed, she covered her face and sobbed. Blake, who had been observing the exchange from a distance, finally spoke up. "Are you Daphne Greengrass?" he inquired, his voice breaking through her despair. Daphne, surprised, looked up to find Blake staring down at her. "You didn't recognize me earlier?" she asked, puzzled by his sudden acknowledgement. Blake admitted that he hadn't recognized her at first. However, thanks to his mastery of legilimency, he quickly discerned her identity. "I couldn't see clearly before, but now I do," he explained, albeit vaguely. Daphne, fearing the worst, asked, "Are you going to expel me from the duel club?" She was aware of Blake's position as the president of the club and dreaded his response. Blake clarified the club's rules, stating, "If your spell was directed at Cassandra, then it's up to her to decide whether you stay or leave. If she forgives you, you can remain a member. If not, I'm afraid you'll have to leave." Cassandra was touched by Blake's consideration of her opinion. Meanwhile, Blake found himself at a loss for words upon sensing her thoughts, humorously noting the automatic censorship of his intended statement. Daphne anxiously awaited Cassandra's verdict. Having resigned herself to the possibility of being ostracized from the Woolley family and, by extension, damaging her family's relations with them. To her astonishment, Cassandra declared, "I have decided to forgive you, Daphne Greengrass." Daphne was taken aback. "Huh?" she uttered, unable to believe what she had just heard. Cassandra explained, "You did, in fact, teach me a valuable lesson. Thanks to your actions, I've learned to remain focused and vigilant in any situation during a duel." Daphne gave Cassandra a look filled with mixed emotions before softly expressing her gratitude and hastily departing with her wand in hand. Blake, moved by Cassandra's generosity, commented, "You are truly magnanimous. I didn't expect you to forgive her." Cassandra, touching the gem on her bracelet, smiled and said, "She genuinely taught me something important." She reflected on how Daphne's unexpected attack had inadvertently shown her where she stood in Blake's heart. Curious, Cassandra then asked Blake, "Did you come here specifically to see me?" Her mood lifted at the thought that, despite the delay, Blake had finally come to visit her. Blake hesitated before answering. "Actually, no. Ginny asked me yesterday to teach her some dueling techniques, so I came for that reason today." Cassandra's smile vanished instantly upon hearing his response, her disappointment palpable. The narrative then took an abrupt turn as Cassandra's frustration boiled over, leading to an outburst directed at Blake, who could only sigh in response to her anger. Chapter 64. Blake's Unexpected Fall. Without any forewarning, a bolt of lightning erupted from the tip of Cassandra's wand, striking with unanticipated precision. In that moment, the seemingly invincible Blake was brought to his knees. As Blake lay motionless on the ground, Cassandra's initial triumph quickly turned into panic. She had never intended for her spell to have such a devastating effect. "Hey, are you okay?" Cassandra asked, her voice trembling with concern. She approached Blake, who remained eerily still, feigning death with an unnerving commitment. He didn't even flinch, let alone respond to her inquiries. Cassandra's worry escalated. She rushed to Blake's side, squatting down to inspect him more closely. Blake's eyes were tightly shut, his face darkened by the electrical charge, a grim testament to the spell's potency. "Why didn't you dodge it? You could have easily avoided it." Cassandra's voice cracked, the verge of tears betraying her anxiety. She couldn't deny her impulsiveness, but the thought of seriously harming Blake was unbearable. The commotion quickly drew a crowd, including Ginny and Pinello, who had been waiting for Blake nearby. They rushed over, concern etched on their faces. "Blake, what happened to him?" Ginny exclaimed, panic rising in her voice at the sight of Blake's charred appearance. Pinello, more composed, examined Blake before turning to Cassandra with a mix of disbelief and reproach. "He's been struck by a weather spell's lightning. Did you really use such a dangerous spell against him?" Cassandra was horrified, realizing the gravity of her actions. "But why didn't he protect himself? He's so powerful," she stammered, tears now freely flowing. Pinello sighed. "Perhaps he never imagined you would attack him. He had no defenses up against you." Cassandra felt as if she had been struck by lightning herself. The realization that Blake's trust in her had left him vulnerable to her spell filled her with deep regret. Meanwhile, Blake enjoyed the drama unfolding around him, his feigned incapacitation more an act of mischief than malice. Ginny, in a state of sheer panic, checked for Blake's breath, leading to a dramatic outburst from Cassandra, who believed she had caused Blake's demise. "I killed Blake?" Cassandra's grief was palpable, her sobs echoing around them. However, Blake couldn't maintain his ruse any longer. "Don't be ridiculous. Your spell couldn't kill me. At most, it was like a massage," he said, his voice laced with amusement. Cassandra's despair turned to relief, then quickly to indignation. She lunged at Blake, her punches a mix of relief and frustration. "You jerk! I thought you were dead!" Blake, now genuinely in pain from Cassandra's blows, pleaded for mercy. "Stop hitting me. I might actually die from this." Cassandra ceased her assault, her apology muffled by sobs. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I promise, no matter what, I won't hit you again." Ginny, ever practical, intervened. "Enough with the hugging. We need to get him to Madame Pomfrey now." Reluctantly, Cassandra helped Blake to his feet, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Meanwhile, news of Blake's injury reached Cedric, who was outraged at the thought of someone harming a fellow Hufflepuff. "What? Blake was beaten? Who did this? Brothers, let's avenge him!" The misunderstanding spiraled, with Cedric rallying for retaliation, unaware of the true nature of Blake's fall. The incident, a mix of misunderstanding, impulsiveness, and the complexities of friendship, left an indelible mark on all involved. Cedric hesitated before speaking. "Well, the truth is, he was injured by Cassandra's curse. You see, Ginny from the Weasley family and Senior Pinello were also present. Cedric is quite clever." After hearing this, he was momentarily stunned, then quickly pieced together the entire story. "Does that mean he got what was coming to him?" "Ha! I knew it!" "Blake, your comeuppance has arrived. This guy has been playing with fire for too long. I knew sooner or later something would happen to him." "So, what's the situation now? Did something happen?" Cedric laughed heartily. Bob was momentarily at a loss for words. Just a moment ago, Cedric had expressed a desire to find someone to avenge Blake, and now here he was, reveling in Blake's misfortune. Cedric's reasoning was simple. If a man had beaten Blake, that would be one thing, but being bested by a woman, that was entirely deserved. Why did he have to flaunt his escapades in front of everyone? This was karma. "Let's go. Everyone, come with me to the hospital wing to visit Blake." Cedric rallied, his arms raised high, and the Hufflepuff boys gathered around him. Even more people joined than when the talk of revenge was in the air. It seemed Blake's downfall was an event not to be missed. It was as if not taking the opportunity to either mock or comfort him would be an injustice to their aggrieved hearts. Soon, a boisterous group made their way to the hospital wing, their enthusiasm so palpable one might mistake their intentions for something more sinister. However, upon convincing Madame Pomfrey to allow them entry for a visit, they were met with an unexpected scene. "Blake, would you like a grape?" Cassandra offered, holding a peeled grape to Blake's lips. Thank you. Ah, it's so sweet." Blake accepted the grape with a content smile. "Is this pressure all right? Are your legs still feeling numb?" Hermione inquired, massaging Blake's right leg, as he had complained about his entire body feeling numb from an electric shock. "Mrs. Pomfrey said you need to drink this potion. I know it's from Professor Snape, so it might taste a bit unpleasant, but it's for your own good," Penello coaxed, holding a small bowl of potion. "No, I won't drink Snape's potion," Blake protested. "Come on, how will you get better if you don't drink it?" Penello whispered, her tone gentle as if soothing a child. "No," Blake stubbornly refused. "How about another grape?" Cassandra offered a compromise, presenting another grape. "Yeah," Blake agreed eagerly. Cedric and the others, who had been blocking the doorway, were stunned by the scene before them. They had come expecting to witness Blake's downfall, not to see him being pampered and fawned over. "Scum!" Cedric muttered under his breath, his disappointment palpable. "What the hell? I came here for this? I was expecting a spectacle." The sentiment was shared among the crowd, their excitement turning to disbelief. Just then, Cedric heard a gentle voice behind him. Could you please move aside? I heard Blake is here." Cedric turned to see Chuzong, holding a bouquet of flowers. She thanked him with a polite nod as he stepped aside, allowing her to pass. Cedric clutched his chest, a sudden pang of discomfort washing over him. "Hey, move! I've brought food for Blake," Hannah exclaimed, pushing through the crowd with a plate of pastries in hand. The group exchanged weary glances. "This is just exhausting." They had arrived full of anticipation, only to leave feeling utterly deflated. Cedric exited the hospital wing with a pale face, only to encounter a young girl with long blonde hair, ethereal eyes, and a peculiar necklace. She inquired politely, "Excuse me, are you here to visit Blake? Is he inside?" "This is a necklace I've prepared for him. It's designed to ward off annoying pests and flies." Another one. "Blake, you truly have it coming." Cedric, overwhelmed, pointed towards the hospital wing with trembling hands. "Yes, he's in there," he confirmed. The girl looked at Cedric for a moment. "You seem very unhappy, Senior. I sense a great deal of turmoil within you," the little girl said, her voice tinged with concern. "What?" Cedric's face drained of color, his expression one of confusion and surprise. "I thought you might find this useful." She reached into her pocket and pulled out an odd-looking fruit, extending it towards Cedric. "This is the fruit of the airship plum. It's known for its ability to repel annoying pests." Without waiting for our response, the girl turned and made her way towards the school infirmary, leaving Cedric standing alone, bewildered, holding the peculiar fruit that bore a striking resemblance to a radish. What kind of pest could she possibly mean? Cedric wondered aloud, still puzzled by the encounter. Blake's stay in the school hospital was brief. Madame Pomfrey discharged him after just one day, citing his lack of injuries as the reason. She admonished him to take better care of himself and avoid being sent to the infirmary by a girl again. Her pointed look caused even the usually unabashed Blake to blush. Despite the embarrassment, Blake felt the ordeal had been worth it, as Cassandra seemed to warm up to him afterward. Additionally, his fellow Hufflepuff students had generously rewarded him with a plethora of treasure chests, making the whole experience quite fruitful. Upon leaving the infirmary, Blake encountered Filch, who expressed concern over Blake's supposed injuries. "I heard you were hurt and was coming to see you." "Oh, I'm fine. It was just a minor injury. Madame Pomfrey had me patched up in no time," Blake reassured him, leaving Filch visibly confused about the severity of Blake's injuries. Their conversation shifted to the health potion Blake had previously given Filch, which had significantly improved Filch's memory and vitality. Pleased with the feedback, Blake suddenly gestured with his hand, opening a dimensional door beneath Filch's feet, causing him to fall through it and onto a cliff's edge. To Filch's astonishment, he found himself floating gently back to safety. "You? Why did you do that?" Filch stammered, still in shock. "Do you feel anything unusual, Mr. Filch?" Blake inquired with a smile. Filch, still bewildered, noticed a small stone levitating in his hand without the use of a magic scroll. Blake explained that Filch had triggered a magical surge for the first time, revealing that Filch was no longer a squib but had become a wizard. Filch's emotions were a mix of joy and disbelief. "Is this because of the potion you gave me?" Blake clarified that it was merely a health potion, not a magical one, implying that the change was due to Filch's own latent abilities being awakened. At that moment, Filch's perception of Blake shifted dramatically, filled with gratitude and admiration. A voice announced that a willing follower had been detected, asking Blake if he wished to include him. "Include," Blake responded, and the voice confirmed the successful addition of a purple-quality follower, marking a significant milestone for both Blake and Filch. Chapter 265, An Unexpected Transformation. Blake was taken aback. He had always known Filch as a mere squib, possessing only the most basic, white-quality potential. Yet, after a magical upheaval, Filch's status had astonishingly ascended to purple quality. Notification. Given the follower's original status as a squib, the magical power was dormant within him, unable to be utilized. Over time, this power accumulated significantly. Now, having transformed into a wizard, the magic within him is exceptionally potent, making his overall strength surpass that of an average adult wizard. Blake nodded in understanding. The system's explanation confirmed his hypothesis. Filch's transformation into a wizard was a success, validating Blake's belief that there were no true squibs, only wizards who hadn't yet unlocked their potential. Unlike muggles, these individuals harbored the latent ability to wield magic. To aid in unlocking this potential, Blake had concocted a potion designed to stimulate magical abilities. While potent and potentially overwhelming for a regular wizard, it was perfectly suited for a squib like Filch. The potion acted as a catalyst, igniting the dormant magic within Filch and allowing him to break free from his constraints, reawakening his magical talents. As Blake reflected on his achievement, the system announced, "Extreme joy detected. Congratulations, you have received a golden treasure chest." This reward further affirmed the success of Filch's transformation and the enhancement of his abilities. "I, Argus Filch, will forever serve you, my master," Filch declared, his eyes brimming with fervent loyalty. This unwavering dedication was a testament to the Supreme Treasure Box's ability to ensure absolute loyalty from followers. "Rise, Filch. We must keep our relationship discreet. Return to Hogwarts and maintain your usual demeanor towards me. Understood?" Blake instructed. "Yes, Lord Blake," Filch responded, his voice laced with respect. Blake then suggested, "Take a day off and visit Diagon Alley. Your wand awaits you at Ollivander's." Though Filch's excitement was palpable, no treasure chest materialized this time. As Blake prepared to return to Hogwarts, he paused, contemplating the implications of Filch's transformation. Could a character's potential truly evolve over time? Handing Filch another potion, Blake said, "Drink this after you finish the first bottle. Follow the same instructions. Come see me once you're done." As October drew to a close, Dumbledore's plan to confront the basilisk encountered obstacles. Even the renowned zoologist Newt Scamander was at a loss for a foolproof defense against the creature's deadly gaze. The risk of facing the basilisk without a reliable countermeasure was too great, leaving Dumbledore and his team to consider a desperate strategy: confronting the beast with their eyes shut. The basilisk, with its deadly gaze, venomous fangs, and massive body, posed a significant challenge. Attempting to confront it with one's eyes closed was tantamount to courting death. As powerful as a wizard might be, they could not hope to match the physical prowess of a basilisk. As Halloween approached, Hogwarts Castle was enveloped in a festive atmosphere. The air was fragrant with the sweet aroma of roasted pumpkin, thanks to Hagrid's use of an expansion spell on a giant pumpkin, from which he crafted various jack-o'-lanterns that adorned the castle. The faces of the young wizards brimmed with joy, for the holidays were universally beloved. However, the mood was considerably more somber in the headmaster's office, where the faculty had convened once again to deliberate on a solution to the basilisk problem. A month had passed without progress, and the issue could no longer be ignored, yet no foolproof strategy had been proposed. "Do we really have to take such a risk?" Dumbledore asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Ideally, I would prefer not to endanger anyone's life. Perhaps we could just leave the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, suggested Professor McGonagall. If no one summons it, it should remain there indefinitely, as it has for many years. This suggestion momentarily silenced the room. While feasible, this approach seemed like willful ignorance now that the threat was known. Professor Kettleburn then proposed, why not consult Blake? He was the one who uncovered this issue after all. His insight has proven quite valuable in the past. Dumbledore hesitated, wary of involving Blake due to the basilisk's danger. Kettleburn quickly clarified, we could seek his advice without exposing him to the actual danger. Impressed by Blake's intellect and his surprising knowledge of magical creatures, even before officially taking the Care of Magical Creatures class, Kettleburn believed Blake might offer a fresh perspective. Newt Scamander agreed, prompting Dumbledore to consent. Let's ask him. Sometimes the creativity of the young surpasses our own. Meanwhile, Blake was dealing with his own dilemma. Ever since Cassandra's near-fatal accident, she had become overly attached to him, complicating his social interactions. As he contemplated how to address Cassandra's clinginess, a white phoenix, Dumbledore's Patronus, appeared before him, drawing the attention of many students. Recognizing the phoenix, Blake listened as Dumbledore's voice, carried by the Patronus, requested his presence in the headmaster's office. Confused but intrigued, Blake excused himself from Cassandra and hurried to the office, feeling her gaze on his back as he left. He mused on the need to address Cassandra's behavior, fearing her attachment might become problematic. Blake's journey to the headmaster's office was filled with curiosity and a sense of urgency, wondering what Dumbledore could possibly need from him during the Halloween festivities. Blake arrived at the headmaster's office swiftly, and upon opening the door, he was taken aback by the sight before him. The room was filled with almost all the professors from Hogwarts, with the notable exception of Lockhart. To his surprise, Mr. Newt Scamander was also present. Blake's heart raced with excitement, immediately guessing the reason for this gathering. "Professor, have you called me here to join the expedition against the basilisk?" Blake asked, barely containing his excitement. "I'm afraid you're mistaken," came the gentle reply from Dumbledore. "Then why am I here?" Blake's excitement turned to confusion. Given the assembly of so many important figures, he had assumed Dumbledore was ready to take action against the basilisk. Dumbledore sighed. "We haven't yet found a foolproof method to counter the basilisk's deadly gaze. Before you arrived, I was considering seeking help from Nico to create an alchemical tool that could protect us from the basilisk's curse." He went on to explain the dilemma they were facing, concluding with, "We invited you here, hoping you might have a fresh perspective to offer." Blake was taken aback. "So the reason for the delay isn't a lack of readiness, but a lack of a starting point. You haven't found a way to counter the basilisk's gaze?" The room nodded in silent agreement. Dumbledore, sensing Blake's astonishment, inquired, "Your expression suggests you might have a solution?" All eyes turned to Blake, who, despite his initial disbelief, realized they were genuinely at an impasse. "This is actually quite simple to solve," Blake exclaimed, incredulous that such a straightforward solution had eluded them all. "Why are we so focused on shielding our eyes? We could simply blind the basilisk." He then revealed his phoenix, Feng Huang, and his dragon, Aoname, with a flourish of red and blue light. A phoenix is immune even to the killing curse. If Feng Huang could blind the basilisk, wouldn't that solve our problem? The room fell into stunned silence. Even Snape had no retort. The simplicity of Blake's solution, which had eluded them for nearly a month, was both astonishing and slightly embarrassing. After a moment, Dumbledore spoke, his voice tinged with a hint of self-reproach. "It seems we've been trapped in our own overcomplicated thoughts. Despite our intelligence, we overlooked such a straightforward solution, primarily because we were too concerned with avoiding any risk to our own." He paused, then with a renewed sense of purpose, declared, "Now that we have a viable solution, there's no better time than the present. Let's take action today." Blake's suggestion had not only provided a way to confront the basilisk, but also reminded everyone that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. This year, with the basilisk's threat neutralized thanks to Blake's intervention, Hogwarts could enjoy a peaceful Halloween, a rare occurrence since Harry Potter's arrival marked annual disturbances. Blake's imagination ran wild with the thought of transforming this year's Halloween event into a thrilling basilisk hunt. However, his excitement was quickly dampened by Dumbledore's stern interjection. "Don't even entertain that idea. We have a responsibility towards the safety of all students. Should the basilisk get loose, the aftermath would be catastrophic," Dumbledore cautioned, bringing Blake's fanciful daydream to an abrupt halt. With the immediate issue resolved, Dumbledore shifted the focus to the evening's festivities. "Now that we've addressed the matter at hand, let's proceed to the Halloween dinner," he announced, signaling an end to the discussion. Turning to Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore suggested, "Minerva, we'll need to devise a plan later. We must find a plausible excuse to extend Halloween by an additional day this year. It's imperative that the castle is devoid of students tomorrow." Blake, unable to contain his enthusiasm, leapt from his seat, exclaiming, "Except for me, I must be the exception." His eagerness to be involved, even in the face of potential danger, highlighted his adventurous spirit. Chapter 266, A Reluctant Departure. "You should head home as well," Dumbledore suggested firmly. Blake scratched his head in mild protest. "But it's just for one day, and I honestly don't know what I'd do at home." "In that case, I'll extend your break for a few more days. I'll have Nagini keep an eye on you," Dumbledore offered. Blake couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. "Professor, you're well aware of what I'm capable of. I could be of real assistance here. And besides, doesn't Nagini need to assist you with opening the Chamber of Secrets? Why would she be monitoring me?" Dumbledore, unfazed, replied, "Then I'll assign someone from the Worley family to watch over you." At the mention of Cassandra Worley, Blake felt a chill. The thought of being alone with her, especially before he had perfected his strategy, was unsettling. He quickly changed his stance. "Well, if that's the situation, I'll refrain from coming to school." "That's for the best. Nagini's primary task was indeed to open the chamber," Dumbledore said, a smile playing on his lips, pleased with Blake's compliance. "I won't be lonely or bored at home, that's for sure. I just remembered. A friend's school doesn't observe the Halloween holiday, and he's been asking me to visit for a while now. It's a school in Austria," Blake mentioned casually, as if an afterthought. Dumbledore's beard quivered at the mention. "Austria? A new school?" His mind raced to one person, Grindelwald. "Don't go," he said sternly. "But it's not far for me. A simple door, and I'm there." Blake hinted, a mischievous glint in his eye. Dumbledore's expression soured. Was Blake subtly threatening him? It seemed out of character for the boy, who had always been well-behaved. This must be Grindelwald's influence, he thought, regretting any contact Blake had with the Dark Wizard. "Can't you just stay home?" Dumbledore pleaded, trying to understand Blake's insistence on facing the basilisk. Little did he know, Blake was motivated by the prospect of treasure rather than heroism. "I just want to help lighten your load," Blake said earnestly. "I don't want to be a sheltered flower. I believe challenging experiences are ahead, and I don't want to be a mere spectator. I want to face them head-on and grow from those experiences." Dumbledore pondered for a moment, then conceded. "If you're that eager, you can stay and assist tomorrow." He knew Blake's capabilities, but still wished to shield him from danger. Yet, he recognized the value in allowing Blake to face challenges and grow. Blake assured him, "Professor, I won't be a burden." "All right, let's head to dinner," Dumbledore said, resigning to the situation. Meanwhile, Roger, Blake's disgruntled roommate, was packing his bags in confusion. Plumbing repairs? Hogwarts is centuries old. Why the sudden need for pipe maintenance? He wondered aloud, reflecting on Professor McGonagall's announcement after dinner. Hogwarts was about to undergo a massive plumbing repair, which unfortunately meant the water might taste quite unpleasant for a while. Consequently, the school announced a tentative 3-day holiday for Halloween, allowing all students to return home until further notice. "You shouldn't worry so much. A holiday sounds nice, doesn't it?" Blake remarked. "Absolutely," Roger exclaimed, his spirits instantly lifted by the thought of an unexpected break, especially one without homework. "Why haven't you packed your luggage yet?" Blake inquired, noticing his friend's lack of preparation. "Oh, I've already packed. I have this suitcase that can hold an astonishing amount of stuff, Roger replied with a hint of pride. Early the next morning, Blake, trying to blend in and avoid drawing unnecessary attention, boarded the Hogwarts Express along with the other students. It was more convenient for him to travel back and forth by train with his friends, sparing him the need to explain his absence otherwise. As the train slowly departed from Hogsmeade, Blake sat in his compartment, meticulously checking the bottles in his pocket. Although he was immune to the basilisk's venom, he knew it could still harm his teammates. Thus, he had prepared detoxification potions, healing potions, and more, adhering to his belief that one should never underestimate their enemies, even in seemingly trivial situations. Suddenly, the carriage door swung open. "Blake, there you are. I've been looking for you," a voice said. A gust of fragrant air wafted into Blake's nostrils as Cassandra took the seat next to him. "Cassandra, I'm in the middle of something. Could you please let go of my arm?" Blake requested, slightly taken aback. The door opened again, and Hermione stepped in, immediately noticing Cassandra clinging to Blake's arm. Her mouth curled into a slight smirk. "It seems I've come at an inopportune time," she remarked, turning to leave. Blake quickly interjected, "No, you've arrived just in time. Actually, there's a question I can't seem to solve, and I was hoping you could help me. Please, don't go." Hermione raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Blake, you're having trouble with a question? Aren't you the top student in our year?" Meanwhile, Cassandra, noticing Blake's attempt to keep Hermione there, pressed down harder on his arm in a show of displeasure, though her efforts were futile against Blake's resilience. Catching the pitiful look in Blake's eyes and the defiant glare from Cassandra, Hermione couldn't help but let a small smile play on her lips. Despite knowing Blake's claim was likely a ruse, she decided to stay, closing the carriage door behind her and walking in confidently. Cassandra's clear objection to her presence only made her decision easier. Chapter 267, The Gift of Flowers. When Hermione finally decided to stay, Blake let out a quiet sigh of relief. He glanced at Cassandra, who was visibly upset next to him, and felt a sense of urgency. It seemed that his latest plan to impress couldn't be postponed any longer. If things continued this way, Blake worried he might end up in a precarious situation. Hermione, seemingly oblivious to Cassandra's mood, sat across from Blake and set her schoolbag aside. "So, what questions do you have for me?" she asked, emphasizing the word please in a way that made it clear she was skeptical of Blake's intentions. Blake, feeling a bit offended by her doubt, solemnly produced a large roll of parchment from his pocket. Hermione was taken aback, surprised by his apparent seriousness. "Why didn't you ask me earlier? I understand this subject just as well as she does." Cassandra interjected, her dissatisfaction evident. Blake, surprised, responded, "I thought you weren't very good at potions." "Not good at potions? Who told you that?" Cassandra retorted, clearly annoyed. "My family runs a herbal medicine business. How could I not be good at potions?" Blake scratched his head. "Well, I remember during your final exam last year, you answered a potions question incorrectly. So making one mistake means I'm not good at it?" Cassandra was livid. Blake muttered, "But it was such a simple question." Cassandra was too angry to form a coherent response. "You get perfect marks, and because I make one mistake, you think I'm bad at potions?" At that moment, Blake's system chimed in. Angry emotion detected. Congratulations to the host for receiving a silver treasure chest. Cassandra, still fuming, pointed at Hermione and demanded, "And why do you think she's better at potions than me?" Hermione, with a half-smile, replied from across the table, "Have you forgotten? I got perfect marks on the potions written test last semester." Cassandra was so enraged she nearly reached for her wand, but Blake caught her hand before she could. She struggled briefly but couldn't free herself, her cheeks flushing with anger and embarrassment. Yet, she didn't ask Blake to let go. Hermione watched Blake's actions and pursed her lips in disapproval. "Cassandra, I'm not saying you're bad at potions. I just have only one copy of this information. After Hermione reviews it, maybe you can take a look?" Blake suggested, trying to defuse the situation. He then explained his dilemma with a potion formula he was working on, which seemed normal, but had issues with certain ingredients affecting its success rate and causing side effects. Blake spread out the parchment, revealing the complex potion formula. Hermione, despite being a top student, felt overwhelmed. She was only in her second year, and, while she might manage to brew the potion, explaining the intricacies of the formula was another matter entirely. Blake's research was nearly complete, aimed at breaking a curse. It was so advanced that even Professor Snape would need to study it intensively. Presenting it to Hermione was a bold move, far beyond what was expected for their level. "Well, I'll need to take a closer look," Hermione said, realizing the challenge ahead. Hermione found herself in a precarious situation. She had just mocked Cassandra's potion-making skills, and now she was under the scrutinizing gaze of the very person she had ridiculed. How could she admit her lack of understanding now? Yet, the truth was, Hermione was struggling to grasp the concept at hand. She resorted to claiming she hadn't yet reviewed the material, buying herself some time under Cassandra's intense stare. The carriage was enveloped in an uncomfortable silence, broken only by Blake's barely concealed amusement at Hermione's feigned composure. "Little girl, you underestimated me earlier. Now, it's your turn to be uneasy," Blake thought, deciding to let Hermione stew in her anxiety a bit longer. After a tense 5 minutes, Cassandra's patience wore thin. "Granger, have you finished? Can I take a look at it?" "Ow! Let me handle it," she demanded. Hermione, still stiff, retorted, "Of course, I'm just a slow reader. It's his atrocious handwriting that's to blame." She silently hoped Cassandra would look away so she could confess her inability to proceed. "My handwriting is atrocious," Blake muttered under his breath, earning a sharp glance from Hermione, which promptly silenced him. Noticing Hermione's distressed state, Blake felt a twinge of sympathy. "Ahem. Cassandra, I just remembered I acquired a new plant recently. I'd like to show it to you," he interjected, successfully diverting Cassandra's attention. Relieved to no longer be the focus of Cassandra's scrutiny, Hermione sighed in relief. Blake rummaged through his collection and presented a pot of unusual plants. At first glance, it appeared to be a sunflower, but it was far from ordinary. Each petal emitted a soft glow, soothing rather than blinding to the eyes. The carriage, previously chilled, warmed up as if spring had arrived with the introduction of this plant. Both Cassandra and Hermione were captivated by the plant, having never encountered anything like it. Its mere presence seemed to lift their spirits, especially Hermione's, who had been feeling particularly downcast. The stark contrast in her mood was undeniable. She now felt that admitting her lack of knowledge wasn't such a dire situation. After all, Cassandra might not know everything either. "It smells wonderful," Cassandra observed, enchanted by the plant's unique fragrance, reminiscent of walking in warm spring sunshine. Ding! 2 emotions of joy detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2 silver treasure chests. Blake thought to himself, pleased with the outcome. Don't quarrel. Don't be angry. A good girl is one who brings joy. Ahem. Cassandra, what kind of plant is this? Where did you find it? Cassandra inquired, her curiosity piqued. Coming from a family deeply involved in the magical plant business, she was well versed in a wide variety of flora. Yet this plant was beyond her recognition. Well, it was originally just an ordinary sunflower, Blake began. I was hoping to harvest some seeds, but I accidentally spilled some leftover magic potion into its pot. And then it mutated. Hermione and Cassandra listened intently, both fascinated by the plant's unexpected transformation. They exchanged speechless glances. You're telling us you accidentally created such a magical plant? One of them finally said. Calling it an accident seems a bit of a stretch when you consistently produce novel creations out of these accidents. Blake's response was a mix of truth and omission. The plant in question, a variant of the ordinary sunflower, had indeed undergone a transformation after being exposed to a magical potion. However, this was no mere accident. The concept was inspired by a plant from the game Plants vs. Zombies, detailed in a booklet Blake had come across. Initially, he had underestimated the sunflower's utility in the real world due to its lack of offensive capabilities, and had thus never bothered to cultivate it. It was only after growing one for amusement that he discovered its unique properties. Once cultivated, the sunflower adapted to its new environment, altering its functionality. Rather than producing sunlight, it emitted a light akin to sunlight, providing a buff to those bathed in its glow. This light had a calming effect and could even enhance the attributes of those it touched, much like a blessing elixir. Blake found the sunflower so useful that he kept one in his bookcase, using it as a desk lamp and even a baby warmer. It could illuminate, refresh, and warm an area. In a team battle scenario, placing one in your camp could prove advantageous. However, the plant did not discriminate between friend and foe. Anyone in its light could benefit, presenting a challenge Blake was still trying to address. Despite this, the sunflower remained highly beneficial for everyday use. "Could I have a seed?" Cassandra asked tentatively, aware that he might be reluctant to part with such a valuable asset, yet she found herself longing for one. Blake responded by placing an entire sunflower pot into her hands. "Here you go. It's full of seeds." Cassandra was taken aback, having expected just a single seed, not the whole plant. "Isn't this too much?" she stammered. "Don't you remember? I'm a technical investor in your family's business," Blake reminded her with a smile. "Consider this a gift for your family, especially your dad. It might save you from being treated like a thief next time we meet." Cassandra's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She was well aware of her father's wary attitude towards Blake. Gratefully, she accepted the sunflower pot, turning to share a triumphant look with Hermione. However, before she could fully savor her victory, Blake presented another pot to Hermione. "This one's for you," he said. Hermione was flustered. This plant is so precious. I couldn't possibly accept it." She would have felt left out if Blake had only gifted one to Cassandra, but receiving such a valuable gift herself made her feel unworthy. "Good things should be shared with good friends," Blake insisted gently. "Take it, and make sure to take good care of it. Having one of these sunflowers at home will be beneficial for your health. You can even harvest the seeds to grow more. I believe your parents will appreciate it." Holding the warm sunflower, Hermione felt a warmth spread through her heart. Blake had even considered her parents in his gift. Cassandra's smile faltered, her emotions a mix of joy and irritation. Ding! Joyful emotion detected. Ding! Angry emotion detected. Chapter 268, The War Between Girls. What I can't get, you can't get either. The Hogwarts Express continued its journey, with Blake busily instructing Cassandra and Hermione on the proper way to remove sunflower seeds. He then taught them how to preserve and plant these seeds. Amidst the lesson, Blake discreetly gathered the parchments scattered on the table, seemingly forgetting the potion question he had initially intended to ask Hermione about. Hermione, however, noticed this slight but deliberate oversight and understood Blake's subtle way of offering assistance. She couldn't help but smirk to herself, thinking, "This guy, first he complicates things for me, then he helps me out. He just wants to teach me a lesson, doesn't he? What a rascal." Cassandra, intrigued by herbal medicine, was deeply engrossed in the lesson on sunflowers, forgetting her initial intent to keep an eye on Hermione. Time flew by, and soon the Hogwarts Express was pulling into platform 9 3/4. Blake handed Hermione and Cassandra each a small bag, a replica of his own plant collection bag, for them to store their sunflowers. Cassandra was particularly excited, believing this plant was a novel discovery not yet known to the public. With minimal luggage due to the temporary vacation, everyone disembarked quickly. Cassandra seized the opportunity to pull Blake aside before Hermione could. "Would you like to visit my house during these days? You could come home with me," she suggested, hoping to introduce Blake's discovery to her parents and clear up any misunderstandings her father might have about him. Blake, however, couldn't accept her invitation, at least not immediately. He had to return to Hogwarts for the Basilisk Subjugation Dungeon event. "No, I just have something else to do," Blake explained, glancing towards the exit where Mr. and Mrs. Worley were looking in their direction. Mr. Worley with a particularly displeased expression. It was clear he was not thrilled to see his daughter so close to Blake immediately upon disembarking. Cassandra, noticing her father's stern gaze, mistakenly thought it was the reason for Blake's refusal. A wave of resentment towards her father surged within her, though Mr. Worley remained oblivious to his daughter's changing emotions, his focus fixed on Blake. "You don't have to worry about my father. As long as I'm here, he wouldn't dare do anything to you," Cassandra declared defiantly. Unbeknownst to them, Hermione had quietly approached. "Blake, why don't you come to my house? We could visit Mrs. Marion during these few days off," she suggested, knowing Blake held a soft spot for the woman who had raised him. Cassandra immediately sensed the shift in Blake's interest at the mention of Mrs. Marion. "No, Granger," she thought, panicking. "This woman is more cunning than I thought. She's found Blake's weak spot." Seeing Blake's hesitation, Cassandra bit her lip and addressed Hermione. "Granger, Blake must be busy these days, so let's not pressure him." Hermione glared at Cassandra, infuriated by her audacity. "This woman, to suggest such a thing, is she implying we're both doomed if I can't have him?" Cassandra returned Hermione's glare with silence, her thoughts clear. If Blake couldn't visit her home, then she would ensure he couldn't visit Hermione's either. "Let neither of us win," she resolved. "Well, I do have other things to attend to," Blake finally said, confirming the complex emotions and rivalries brewing between the girls. Blake smiled and waved goodbye to his friends before making his way out of platform 9 3/4. As he approached the exit, he noticed Harry and the Weasley family gathered together. It occurred to Blake that Harry would likely prefer spending the unexpected vacation days at the Weasleys' burrow rather than returning to his uncle's house. With this thought, Blake turned to avoid the crowd, intending to find a secluded alley to open a dimensional door back to school. However, his escape was halted by a familiar voice calling his name. Ignoring it at first, Blake continued to walk away, but the sound of hurried footsteps and the tug on his clothing made him stop. Turning around, he found Ginny Weasley, out of breath from chasing him. Ginny explained that she had been calling out to him, but he hadn't heard her. She mentioned that her parents, especially her father, wanted to thank Blake personally for his help and for saving her. Mr. Weasley's smiling face caught Blake's eye, prompting him to respond with polite gratitude. Ginny then invited Blake to visit the burrow, mentioning that Harry Potter would be there as well. However, Blake's attention was drawn to two girls watching them from the hidden entrance of platform 9 3/4. Realizing he couldn't accept Ginny's invitation due to his prior commitments and the presence of the two girls he had just evaded, Blake politely declined, promising to visit another time. After saying goodbye to Ginny and waving to the Weasley family from a distance, Blake disappeared into the crowd. Hermione and Cassandra, the two girls by the hidden wall, exchanged looks before leaving the scene. Blake reappeared in an empty dormitory, surrounded by sparks and stars. He called out for Baker, a house elf, who promptly appeared with a large cloth bag. Blake inspected the contents of the bag, satisfied with Baker's preparation. He praised the elf, who was visibly delighted by the acknowledgement. After storing the bag in his system warehouse, Blake assured Baker he would call upon him if needed. With that, Baker bowed and vanished. Opening another dimensional door, Blake stepped through and arrived at the principal's office. Inside, he saw that most of the participants from today's events had already gathered, engaging in small groups and conversing. Newt, spotting Blake, nodded in greeting. This revised version corrects grammatical errors, improves sentence structure for better readability, enhances descriptive details for clearer imagery, ensures character actions and dialogues are consistent and logical, removes redundant phrases, clarifies ambiguous parts, and adjusts formatting for better presentation. Nagini swiftly approached Blake, extending a peculiar helmet towards him. "You've arrived. Please take this with you," she said, her voice laced with urgency. The helmet, an oddity at first glance, boasted eyes adorned with two dark crystal stones, giving it an almost mystical appearance. "What is this?" Blake inquired, his curiosity piqued by the unusual object in his hands. "This is a protective helmet that Professor Dumbledore requested Mr. Flamel to craft especially for you," Nagini explained. "You must carry it with you before we can embark on our journey together." It became clear that Dumbledore harbored concerns for Blake's safety, going to great lengths to commission Nico Flamel to create this protective gear. Among those present, Blake arguably needed such protection the least, yet the gesture stirred a sense of gratitude within him. Without a word of protest, he donned the helmet, its weight settling comfortably on his head. The others in the room, including the typically acerbic Snape, offered no comments or jests. Their silence spoke volumes, acknowledging and respecting Dumbledore's intentions. At that moment, Dumbledore himself entered, his eyes immediately finding Blake, now equipped with the helmet. A look of satisfaction crossed his face as he nodded approvingly. "Very well, now that we're all prepared, let's proceed. Blake, lead the way," he instructed. Before long, the group, consisting of 8 or 9 individuals, arrived at the entrance of an abandoned girls' bathroom. "The entrance to the secret chamber is right here," Blake announced, his voice echoing slightly in the empty space. Dumbledore, taking the lead, entered the bathroom first. "Who's there?" a voice echoed, belonging to a ghost adorned in black-rimmed glasses, her form suspended in midair. It was Myrtle, the unfortunate soul who perished in the Chamber of Secrets incident, now looking towards the newcomers with a mix of curiosity and anger. However, the sight of so many people entering her domain startled her, prompting a scream before she vanished back into a toilet stall. Dumbledore, watching her retreat, couldn't help but feel a surge of pity and guilt. If only he had been able to stop Tom Riddle back then. "Professor, over here. This is the entrance," Blake called out, drawing Dumbledore's attention to a faucet marked with a small snake carving. Dumbledore approached, inspecting the faucet closely before nodding to Blake, a silent confirmation of their discovery. Blake then turned to Nagini, who understood her role without needing to be told. She moved closer to the faucet and began to hiss in Parseltongue, the language of serpents, uttering the command to open the door. In the next instant, the entire wash basin began to shift, signaling the opening of the secret chamber and the beginning of their perilous journey. Chapter 269, The Charge into the Unknown. As Nagini's voice faded, the small snake on the faucet began to slither away. The crisp sound of machinery followed immediately after. All the sinks retracted inward, transforming into a column, which then began to move automatically, revealing a large, dark hole. The group gathered around, drawn by an unspoken curiosity. In the depths of the large, dark hole, waves of an indescribable cold aura emanated, causing everyone present to shudder involuntarily. "No wonder we couldn't find that monster back then," someone murmured. "It turns out it's been moving through these ducts all along." Dumbledore gazed into the abyss, a realization dawning on him. The mystery that had puzzled him for years suddenly became clear. Despite numerous searches throughout Hogwarts, the hiding place of the monster remained elusive. The thought that it could have been navigating through the underground pipes had never occurred to them. Blake broke the silence. "There's a long pipe down there. It's sloped like a slide, though quite lengthy." He added, "This is how Ginny must have slipped down before." Upon hearing this, Snape exchanged a glance with Dumbledore before taking a decisive leap into the hole. The sound of his body sliding echoed from the entrance, gradually fading into the distance. Blake watched in astonishment. Snape's bravery was undeniable. Without a clear understanding of the situation, he had taken the lead, demonstrating his willingness to undertake the most challenging tasks for Dumbledore. After a moment of silence, a pure white stag emerged from the pipe, signaling safety. "This is Severus Patronus. It seems safe down there," Dumbledore remarked before jumping in himself, casting a cushioning charm to slow his descent. Following Dumbledore, Newt and McGonagall made their way down, leaving Blake, surrounded by a protective circle formed by his peers, to descend last. Utilizing his levitation cloak, Blake floated down into the cold, dark pipe. The temperature inside was significantly colder than outside, causing Nagini to wrap her coat tighter around herself. Snape, with the faint light of his wand, scouted for the correct path among the numerous forks in the pipeline. "Go this way," Blake suggested, pointing towards a path. He remembered it well from when Tom had controlled Ginny to take this route. Dumbledore nodded in agreement and led the way, with Blake trailing behind, protected by the group. Despite understanding their protective instincts, Blake couldn't help but feel frustrated. This cautious approach was hindering his chances of discovering treasures. However, he remained patient, knowing the basilisk wouldn't appear unless summoned. As they progressed, Blake noticed Nagini shivering from the cold. Reaching into his bag, he retrieved a pot of sunflowers, one of 3 he had planted. The other 2 pots had been gifted to Cassandra and Hermione, but he had kept one for himself. With the appearance of the sunflowers, the chilling atmosphere in the pipe vanished, replaced by a warmth that lightened everyone's spirits. The group ahead turned around upon noticing the change and saw the sunflower in Blake's hand, its light illuminating the pipe as bright as day without being harsh on the eyes. Snape, feeling a newfound vigor, looked at the sunflower in surprise. It was the light from this peculiar plant that had revitalized them, a realization that filled him with a mix of astonishment and gratitude. All kinds of basic energy surged through his body, akin to the effects of an amplification potion. Snape, the potion's master, marveled at the sight. "I've never encountered such an extraordinary plant before," he exclaimed. "Boy, you possess an array of peculiar items," Snape remarked with genuine astonishment. "Of course, but my collection of unusual potion recipes is even more extensive," Blake responded, cradling the sunflower as he moved to the forefront of the group. Snape's lips twitched involuntarily, his initial impulse to scoff at Blake's claim stifled by the realization that there might be truth in the boy's words. Considering Blake's apparent indifference towards the life-extending potion, a concoction that had been under evaluation for over a month without any inquiry from Blake, it was plausible he had more bizarre recipes up his sleeve. Dumbledore observed the mutated sunflower in Blake's grasp with a scrutinizing gaze. "A mutated sunflower, cultivated accidentally with the remnants of a magic potion, you say? It does seem like it could be beneficial," Blake remarked nonchalantly, shrugging his shoulders. Dumbledore had grown accustomed to Blake's knack for unveiling new discoveries or awakening unexpected abilities. The headmaster realized that delving into the veracity of Blake's claims each time would be an exhaustive endeavor, regardless of their truthfulness. Thus, he accepted Blake's somewhat cursory explanation without further question. "I'll lead the way," Blake declared, clutching the sunflower. Ignoring Dumbledore's concerned expression, he dashed ahead. "Wait, slow down," Dumbledore called out after him, to no avail. The group soon arrived at the circular door, adorned with eerie snake-shaped carvings. "Is it just me, or was Slytherin somewhat peculiar in his tastes? Why else would he favor these hellish decorations?" Blake mused aloud. "Don't speak ill," Dumbledore chided gently, casting a glance at Nagini. Understanding the task at hand, Nagini approached the door and uttered, "Open," in Parseltongue. The snake carvings on the door recoiled, one after another, until a small crack appeared with a click. As Dumbledore prepared to inspect the opening cautiously, Blake, with a swift wave of her wand, forced the door wide open. The sudden action startled everyone. "Blake, get back!" Professor McGonagall exclaimed, attempting to pull Blake to a safer position. However, Blake's strength proved too much for her. "I can't just stand back. With the best equipment at my disposal, why should I hide?" Blake argued, tapping his helmet, which emitted a metallic clang. "You all should keep your distance. You lack proper equipment, and it's too risky. As for me, I have a helmet. I'm fearless." With that, Blake charged towards the door with a sense of bravado. Dumbledore, overhearing Blake's justification, felt a mix of frustration and amusement. "I had Nico fetch that helmet for your protection, hoping you'd use it to stay safe, not as a pretext to rush into danger," he thought, his beard quivering with vexation. Ding! An angry emotion detected, a voice chimed in Blake's head, followed by, "Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a silver treasure chest." "Stay put," Dumbledore commanded, lifting Blake by the collar and placing him at a safe distance. After ensuring Blake remained there, Dumbledore surveyed the secret chamber through the doorway. It appeared to be a regular rectangular room adorned with numerous statues, yet nothing out of the ordinary caught his eye. His attention then shifted to the mouth of the Slytherin statue, the basilisk's hiding spot. He turned to Nagini. "Follow the plan, but remember, once the summoning is complete, turn and run immediately. Do not look back." Nagini nodded, understanding the gravity and risk of her role as the sole proficient Parseltongue speaker. "Blake, fetch the phoenixes," Dumbledore instructed. Blake, eager to assist, hurried over once more, causing Dumbledore's brow to furrow in concern. However, before anyone could voice their concerns, Blake interjected, "It's too perilous for Nagini to venture in like this. I have a solution. She won't have to take any risks." With that, Blake produced a small silver orb and handed it to Nagini. "Press the button on top, then utter the Parseltongue command to summon creatures," he instructed. Nagini complied with Blake's instructions, albeit with some hesitation. Dumbledore, though initially uncertain, chose not to intervene upon hearing Blake's assurance that Nagini wouldn't be endangered. He, too, was curious about Blake's alternative strategy. After Nagini returned the orb, Blake examined it closely. "Excellent. This recording orb has captured Nagini's parcel tongue," he announced. "Now, Nagini won't have to personally expose herself to danger." With a press of the button, Blake tossed the orb into the chamber. Moments later, the hissing sounds of Parseltongue echoed from within the secret room. Dumbledore immediately cautioned everyone to keep their distance and avert their eyes to avoid the basilisk's lethal gaze. As the hissing from the recording faded, the sound of something heavy collapsing to the ground reverberated through the chamber, signaling the basilisk had been lured out. Without needing any encouragement from Dumbledore, Blake prepared for the next phase of their plan. A red and a faint blue light shimmered, and Fox and Chingnu, two phoenixes, materialized on Blake's arms. Chingnu, intrigued, pecked at the unusual helmet Blake wore, displaying a clear curiosity about the strange attire. "Enough with the distractions. Prepare yourselves. On my command, dive in and target its eyes," Blake instructed. The phoenixes chirped in unison, signaling their understanding and readiness. Newt and Professor Kettleburn watched this display with a mix of envy and admiration. The ability to communicate so effectively with magical creatures was truly remarkable, a skill they both wished they possessed. Following their brief interaction, the phoenixes activated a mechanism on their leg rings, causing a metallic substance to envelop their bodies, forming protective battle armor. This transformation left everyone in awe at the ingenious use of such compact technology to equip the phoenixes for combat. "Excellent," Blake remarked, satisfied with their readiness. He then produced two more orbs. "Flashbangs," he declared, hurling them into the chamber. The orbs emitted a blinding white light, forcing everyone, even those outside the chamber, to shield their eyes. The basilisk, with its sensitive eyes, roared in agony from within. Seizing the moment, Blake released the phoenixes into the chamber. The sounds of their fierce battle with the basilisk filled the air, accompanied by the creature's enraged roars. "Now's our chance." Blake, feeling the connection with his phoenixes and sensing their success, charged into the chamber without hesitation. "Just wait for me," he called out. Dumbledore, taken aback by Blake's rashness, couldn't help but worry. "You have no idea what awaits inside. Why risk your life so recklessly?" Despite his concerns, Dumbledore followed Blake into the chamber, with the rest of the group close behind, wands at the ready. Upon entering, they were greeted by the sight of a massive dark green snake writhing in agony on the ground. The basilisk's eyes were sealed shut, evidenced by the blood streaming from them. It had lost its most formidable power. Blake sprinted forward, his wand poised for action. With a determined shout, he unleashed his spell. "The divine edge is shadowless." Snape, taken aback by the unexpected turn of events, could only muster a bewildered "Ah!" Chapter 270, Snape's Bewilderment and Blake's Mastery. The divine edge is shadowless. Snape had never imagined his original curse, the divine edge shadowless, could be wielded with such flair. A dark, blade-shaped arc, larger than the basilisk itself, soared towards the monstrous creature. Snape watched, utterly dumbfounded. Since the inception of this curse, he had never seen it manifest with such a vivid, tangible form. In his experience, the curse was invisible, leaving no trace, simply cast and then striking the enemy without any fanfare. Thus, the spectacle before him, with Blake summoning a massive blade-shaped arc, left Snape scratching his head in confusion. Basilisks, notorious for their formidable strength among dark creatures, are not easily deterred. Despite its blinded eyes, the basilisk sensed imminent danger. It lowered its head and lashed out with its tail in a sweeping attack. Chingnu and Fox, caught in the midst of the chaos, took to the skies to evade. Yet this sweeping motion brought the basilisk's tail directly into the path of Blake's shadowless curse. With a crisp crack, the basilisk's scales, tough as they might be, offered no resistance, akin to slicing through tofu. A segment of its tail thudded heavily to the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. Remarkably, the divine edge shadowless curse persisted, its potency diminished but undeterred, as it continued its relentless assault on the basilisk. Another crack resounded, followed by a pained roar from the basilisk. It managed to dodge a lethal strike by instinctively lowering its head, yet the curse grazed its neck, leaving a deep, bone-exposing wound. The events unfolded with breathtaking speed. In just over a second, the basilisk went from facing its opponent to sustaining serious injuries at the hands of Blake. Without pause, Blake waved her wand again, and the stone pillars surrounding them trembled violently. The serpentine stone sculptures adorning the pillars sprang to life, transforming into 8 massive stone snakes, each only slightly smaller than the basilisk. They descended and launched an immediate assault on the creature. Entangled by the stone serpents, the basilisk roared in fury and desperation. One of the sculptures bit into the basilisk with its sharp stone fangs, causing further injury. Far from succumbing, the basilisk's struggle intensified, crushing 2 of its stone assailants into powder. However, the remaining sculptures succeeded in immobilizing it. Blake prepared for the final blow, her wand slicing through the air with a commanding sass and then a decisive fall. A nearby stone pillar, devoid of any sculptures, toppled towards the basilisk's neck. In a breathtaking transformation, the pillar morphed into a sharp, metallic blade just before impact. With a definitive crack, the basilisk's head was severed, its body collapsing into a heap while the severed head lay twitching helplessly on the ground. Blake, with a swift motion, returned his wand to his belt. "Here comes the sword," he announced. 9 swords, trailing white mist, flew towards the basilisk's severed head. With a series of whoosh sounds, the swords, guided by Blake's alchemical prowess, penetrated the basilisk's skull, ensuring its demise. This display of magical mastery left everyone, especially Snape, in awe of Blake's capabilities. The once simple curse had been transformed into a spectacle of power and precision, a testament to Blake's skill and innovation. The basilisk's brain was completely obliterated, leaving its headless body twitching on the ground. Blake nodded in satisfaction, then removed the helmet he had been wearing. With the basilisk dead and the crisis averted, there was no longer any need for such precautions. Blake had never intended to tame the basilisk, knowing full well that Dumbledore would never consent to it. Moreover, the basilisk had already claimed the life of a student, and its petrifying gaze was far too dangerous to risk around his friends. The thought of losing any of them to the creature's deadly stare was unbearable. Thus, eliminating the basilisk was the most prudent course of action, not to mention the potential benefits of doing so. After confirming the basilisk's demise, Blake approached the creature's carcass for a closer inspection. Behind him, everyone was in shock. The basilisk, a monstrous legacy of Slytherin, was a formidable dark creature. They had braced themselves for a difficult battle, with injuries or even deaths anticipated. Yet, what unfolded before their eyes was a swift and decisive victory, achieved by Blake and 2 phoenixes in less than 20 seconds, leaving the basilisk decapitated. Professor Sprout, who had been nervously clutching her wand, now wiped her sweaty palms, relieved yet bewildered. "So, what was our purpose here?" she mused aloud, echoing the sentiments of the group. "It feels as though we've come merely to spectate." Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore exchanged impressed remarks about Blake's transfiguration skills and his clever use of the confiscated alchemy flying swords. Snape, observing Blake, felt a mix of emotions. Despite being younger, Blake's achievements in potion-making and innovation were already surpassing those of many seasoned wizards. As Blake reveled in the system notifications for treasure chests in his mind, he dropped a large bag on the ground, drawing curious glances from the onlookers. His clothes transformed into a surgical suit, and he produced a large saw from the bag. Snape, bewildered, inquired about Blake's intentions. "What?" Blake responded, surprised by the question. "This is a basilisk we're talking about. Its flesh, scales. Do you realize how rare and valuable these materials are? As a potions master, haven't you considered their potential?" Blake's enthusiasm for researching the basilisk's components to discover new potion formulas was palpable. Snape, catching on, quickly negotiated his share of the spoils, suggesting a division that favored him slightly more. This moment marked the beginning of a new venture into the unknown properties of basilisk materials, promising the potential for groundbreaking discoveries in the world of potions. "Points, and you are just 1 point," Snape sneered, his expression contorting with disdain. "You parade around with the shamelessness of some decrepit old man." Snape's teeth clenched in frustration. Who? Who is this old man you dare speak of? Name him. Blake's voice rose in challenge. Of course. Snape's retort was cut short as a shiver of apprehension coursed down his spine. Turning slightly, he caught Dumbledore's gaze fixed upon him, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. A cold dread settled in Snape's heart. Hastily, he altered the name that was on the verge of escaping his lips, his voice dropping to a whisper so faint it was barely audible. Of course, it's all Grindelwald's fault. The accusation hung in the air, its delivery so soft it seemed to blend into the surrounding silence. Snape's attempt to deflect blame was a desperate maneuver, one made under the watchful eye of Dumbledore, whose mere presence could sway the course of any conversation.